Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundation. Boyd Hutchinson had built his life like a fortress, methodically, quietly, and with walls so thick that few ever glimpsed what lay beneath. At 42, he owned a modest construction company in Cedar Falls, a mid-sized town where everyone knew everyone, but nobody really knew Boyd. His employees respected him for his fairness and feared him for his intensity. When Boyd made a decision, it was final. When someone crossed him, they learned quickly never to do it again. The Hutchinson name carried weight in Cedar Falls, though not the kind people whispered about at dinner parties. Boyd's grandfather had been the town's most feared loan shark during the Depression. His father had run the docks until his death, controlling every shipment that came through the port. Boyd had chosen a more legitimate path, but the family's network of connections, some legal, others existing in the gray areas, remained intact and loyal. He'd met Lindsay Walsh 12 years ago at a charity auction. She was 25 then, a kindergarten teacher with honey-colored hair and a smile that could disarm anyone. Boyd, normally suspicious of everyone, found himself genuinely captivated. Lindsay seemed different from the women who usually pursued him for his money or connections. She appeared innocent, caring, untouched by the cynicism that permeated his world. Their courtship was a study in contrasts. Boyd, calculating and reserved, found himself opening up to Lindsay's warmth. She laughed at his dry humor, encouraged his rare moments of vulnerability, and seemed genuinely interested in building a life together. After 2 years of dating, he proposed with his grandmother's ring, a decision he'd later realize was his first mistake. The early years of marriage were good. Lindsay quit teaching after their wedding, claiming she wanted to focus on their home. Boyd supported this decision, even when she showed little interest in having children. He assumed she was waiting for the right time. He bought her a beautiful house on Maple Street, gave her access to his accounts, and trusted her completely. But Boyd failed to recognize the signs that should have been obvious to someone of his experience. Lindsay's interest in their life together began to wane around year 5. She started taking longer shopping trips, joined a book club that met at odd hours, and developed an enthusiasm for yoga classes that seemed to require increasingly revealing outfits. Boyd's business associates, men who'd learned to read people as a matter of survival, began dropping subtle hints. Mickey Torino, who ran the waste management contract for the county, mentioned seeing Lindsay at restaurants when Boyd was supposedly out of town. Frank DeLuca, whose family controlled most of the legitimate gambling in the region, casually noted that Lindsay seemed to have made new friends at the casino. But Boyd dismissed their concerns. He'd built his life on the principle that loyalty, once earned, was absolute. Lindsay had chosen him, married him, shared his bed for over a decade. In his mind, that created an unbreakable bond. He was about to learn how naive that assumption was. The truth began to unravel on a Tuesday in March. Boyd had returned early from a business trip to Pittsburgh, where he'd been finalizing a contract for a new shopping complex. He'd caught an earlier flight, planning to surprise Lindsay with dinner at Rossini's, the Italian place where they'd had their first date. But Lindsay wasn't home. Her car was gone, and the house had the peculiar emptiness that suggested she'd been away for hours. Boyd called her cell phone and was told she was at book club. When he drove past the library, her car wasn't there. A check of the yoga studio yielded the same result. That's when Boyd did what he should have done years earlier. He began to investigate. Using contacts who owed him favors, he discovered that Lindsay had been seen regularly at the Grandview Hotel with Travis Kellerman, a real estate developer who'd moved to Cedar Falls 6 months ago. Kellerman was everything Boyd wasn't: flashy, charming, and reckless. He drove a red Corvette, wore expensive suits, and had a reputation for pursuing married women. He'd made a fortune flipping properties in California before some unspecified trouble forced him to relocate. Now he was trying to establish himself in Cedar Falls' real estate market. The investigation revealed that Lindsay and Travis had been meeting for 3 months. They were careful, but not careful enough. Hotel receipts, credit card records, and witness statements painted a clear picture of a full-blown affair. But Boyd discovered something else that cut even deeper. Lindsay had been feeding Travis inside information about Boyd's business dealings, including details about upcoming municipal contracts and zoning changes. Boyd spent that night in his study, staring at the evidence spread across his desk. The photos of Lindsay entering and leaving the hotel. The bank records showing cash withdrawals that corresponded to their meetings. The recorded conversations his contact at the phone company had provided. By dawn, Boyd Hutchinson had made a decision that would change everything. He wouldn't confront Lindsay directly. He wouldn't demand explanations or seek marriage counseling. Instead, he would do what his father and grandfather had taught him. He would plan, he would wait, and when the time was right, he would strike with such force that his enemies would never recover. The man who'd built his life on loyalty was about to show his wife and her lover what happened when that loyalty was betrayed. Chapter 2. The Discovery. For the next 2 weeks, Boyd Hutchinson became a ghost in his own life. He maintained his routine, leaving for work at 7, returning by 6, sharing dinner with Lindsay while she chatted about her book club or yoga class. But underneath his calm exterior, Boyd was conducting the most thorough investigation of his life. He'd learned patience from his father, who used to say, "A man who acts in anger acts like a fool. A man who acts with cold planning acts like God." Boyd was determined to be the latter. Using a network of contacts that stretched back 3 generations, Boyd began assembling a complete picture of his wife's betrayal. Tony Marcelli, who ran a private investigation firm that existed primarily to serve the Hutchinson family's interests, provided surveillance footage. Detective Ray Kowalski, who owed Boyd several significant favors, offered access to phone records and credit reports. Even Father McKenna at St. Catherine's, where Boyd's family had attended for decades, quietly shared information about the spiritual counseling Lindsay had sought, counseling that had mysteriously coincided with her affair. The scope of Lindsay's deception was breathtaking. She'd been using a secondary credit card, one Boyd didn't know existed, to fund her activities with Travis. She'd established a private email account and was communicating with her lover through an encrypted messaging app. Most damaging of all, she'd been photographing documents from Boyd's home office, sharing strategic business information that could be worth millions in the right hands. Travis Kellerman, meanwhile, was proving to be exactly the kind of predator Boyd had expected. The man had a pattern of targeting wealthy, married women in every city where he'd operated. His real estate development was largely a front for more elaborate cons. He would romance married women, extract financial and business information, then use that intelligence to manipulate property deals and municipal contracts. But Travis had made a critical error in choosing Lindsay Hutchinson as his mark. He'd assumed Boyd was just another successful small-town businessman, comfortable, complacent, and ultimately harmless. Travis had no idea that Boyd's construction company was merely the legitimate face of a family that had been moving money, favors, and influence through Cedar Falls for 3 generations. Boyd's grandfather, Salvatore Hutchinson, had come to America in 1920 with nothing but ambition and a willingness to do whatever was necessary to survive. By 1930, he controlled the flow of liquor, gambling, and loans throughout the county. When Prohibition ended, Salvatore transitioned into legitimate businesses while maintaining the network of relationships that had made him powerful. Boyd's father, Michael, had inherited both the businesses and the connections. He'd expanded the family's influence into construction, waste management, and municipal contracts while carefully avoiding the kinds of activities that attracted federal attention. By the time Boyd took over, the Hutchinson name was synonymous with success, reliability, and, for those who knew the family's history, consequences for those who crossed them. Now, as Boyd compiled evidence of his wife's betrayal, he began to formulate a plan that would destroy both Lindsay and Travis while protecting his own interests. But first, he needed to understand exactly what they were planning. The breakthrough came on a Friday evening when Lindsay announced she was attending a weekend women's retreat at a spa in the mountains. Boyd's surveillance team followed her instead to the Grandview Hotel, where she met Travis for what appeared to be an extended planning session. Hidden cameras in Travis's room, installed by professionals who owed the Hutchinson family considerable favors, captured hours of conversation. What Boyd heard that night changed everything. Lindsay and Travis weren't just having an affair. They were planning to destroy Boyd's life systematically. Travis had convinced Lindsay that Boyd was hiding significant assets and that she deserved far more than she was getting. Their plan was to file for divorce while simultaneously accusing Boyd of domestic abuse, business fraud, and tax evasion. Lindsay would claim she discovered Boyd's criminal activities and was cooperating with federal investigators. Travis had connections with a corrupt FBI agent who would provide apparent legitimacy to their claims. They would freeze Boyd's assets, destroy his reputation, and ultimately force him to settle for a fraction of his actual worth. Lindsay would emerge as a sympathetic victim. Travis would use the chaos to manipulate several pending real estate deals, and Boyd would be left ruined. But the most chilling part of their conversation was Lindsay's casual cruelty. She laughed about Boyd's obvious devotion to her, calling him pathetically loyal and completely clueless. She described intimate moments from their marriage in mocking terms, reducing 12 years of what Boyd had thought was genuine love to a series of calculated performances. "He actually thinks I've been faithful all these years," Lindsay said, her laughter sharp and cold. "The poor bastard has no idea how many men I've been with. Boyd's just been convenient, stable income, nice house, and dumb enough to trust me completely." Travis's response was equally revealing. Men like Boyd think they're smart because they've got money and connections, but they're emotional children. Once we spring this trap, he'll be so focused on defending himself that he won't see the real damage until it's too late. By the time the dust settles, he'll be broken, and we'll own this town. Boyd listened to the entire conversation 3 times, memorizing every word, every inflection, every casual moment of betrayal. By Monday morning, he'd made his decision. Lindsay and Travis wanted to play a game of destruction. He would show them what real destruction looked like. But Boyd's plan wouldn't be reactive or defensive. He wouldn't simply expose their scheme and move on. Instead, he would create a trap so elaborate and devastating that neither Lindsay nor Travis would ever recover. And he would use their own arrogance and greed against them. The first phase would begin with Boyd appearing to be exactly what Lindsay and Travis believed him to be, a trusting husband who had no idea what was coming. But by the time they realized their mistake, it would be far too late. Boyd Hutchinson was about to show them why his family had survived and thrived for 3 generations while others had fallen. The lesson would be permanent, public, and absolutely merciless. Chapter 3. The Trap Springs. The plan Lindsay and Travis had so carefully crafted began to unfold on a humid Thursday evening in June. Boyd had known exactly when it would happen. His surveillance network had intercepted the final planning session 3 days earlier. He was ready. Boyd arrived home from work at his usual time to find Lindsay in the kitchen, chopping vegetables with unusual vigor. Her movements were sharp, aggressive, and her eyes held a gleam he'd never seen before. She was wearing a dress that was slightly too formal for a quiet evening at home, and her makeup was more elaborate than necessary. She was dressed for a performance. "How was your day?" Lindsay asked, her voice carrying a false sweetness that made Boyd's skin crawl. "Same as always," Boyd replied, loosening his tie. "Wilson's project is running behind schedule, but we'll manage." "How was your day?" "Oh, busy. I had lunch with Rachel, then stopped by the bank to update our account information." Lindsay's smile was predatory. "I've been thinking we should review our finances. Make sure everything is properly organized." Boyd nodded, understanding that this was the opening move. Lindsay was establishing her awareness of their financial situation for the record. "That sounds sensible. We can look at everything this weekend." "Actually," Lindsay said, setting down her knife, "I've already started. I hope you don't mind, but I found some documents in your office that concern me." "Here it comes," Boyd thought. Out loud, he said, "What kind of documents?" Lindsay's expression shifted to one of pained concern. "Boyd, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Are you involved in anything illegal?" Boyd felt a surge of admiration for her acting ability. If he hadn't known better, He might have believed her concern was genuine. What are you talking about? I found records of cash payments, meetings with people who have criminal backgrounds, and contracts that don't seem legitimate. Lindsay's voice trembled slightly. I'm scared, Boyd. I'm scared for us. This was the moment Boyd had been preparing for. He let his expression shift to one of surprise, then hurt, then anger. You went through my private files? I had to, Lindsay said, tears beginning to form in her eyes. When I saw the bank statements showing all those cash withdrawals, I needed to understand what was happening. Boyd took a step toward her, and Lindsay immediately took 2 steps back, her hand moving to her purse where Boyd knew she had a small digital recorder running. Every word of this conversation would be used as evidence in court. Lindsay, those are legitimate business transactions. If you had questions, you should have asked me directly instead of sneaking around. I try to ask you, but you always change the subject when I bring up money. Lindsay's voice was getting louder, more emotional. Boyd, I think you're involved with organized crime. I think our entire life has been built on illegal money. Boyd let his anger show, stepping closer again. This time, Lindsay pressed herself against the kitchen counter, her eyes wide with apparent fear. That's insane, Boyd said, his voice rising. My family has been in legitimate business for decades. Just because we know people from different backgrounds doesn't mean... Different backgrounds? Lindsay's laugh was shrill. Boyd, these men are criminals. Mickey Torino, Frank DeLuca, Tony Marcelli, I've looked them all up. They're connected to organized crime, and you're meeting with them regularly. Boyd was impressed. Lindsay had done her homework, identifying several of his legitimate business associates and characterizing them as criminal connections. To someone unfamiliar with the complexities of small-town business relationships, her accusations might seem credible. Those men are business associates, Boyd said. Mickey handles waste management for my construction sites. Frank owns several legitimate businesses. Tony runs a security firm. You're seeing conspiracies where none exist. Then explain the cash payments, Lindsay demanded. Explain why you have records of meetings that aren't on your official calendar. Explain why you have documentation about municipal contracts months before they're publicly announced. Boyd realized that Lindsay and Travis had been far more thorough than he'd initially understood. They'd been building this case for months, not weeks. But their thoroughness would ultimately be their downfall. I can explain all of that, Boyd said. But first I want to know why you're really asking these questions. Who put these ideas in your head? Lindsay's expression flickered, just for a moment, and Boyd saw genuine panic in her eyes. Nobody put anything in my head. I'm concerned about my husband and our marriage. Are you? Boyd asked quietly. Or are you looking for reasons to justify something you've already decided to do? Before Lindsay could answer, the doorbell rang. Both of them froze, staring at each other across the kitchen. Boyd could see the calculation in Lindsay's eyes. This wasn't part of her plan, but it was part of Boyd's. The bell rang again, followed by heavy knocking. Boyd walked to the front door, knowing exactly who he would find. Through the window, he could see 3 Cedar Falls police officers standing on his porch. Boyd opened the door with the expression of a confused, innocent man. Officers, what can I do for you? Detective Ray Kowalski stepped forward, his face professionally neutral. Boyd had known Ray for 15 years, and they'd worked together on several municipal projects. But tonight, Ray was strictly business. Mr. Hutchinson, we've received a complaint of domestic violence. We need to speak with you and your wife. Boyd heard Lindsay gasp behind him, a perfect performance of shock and fear. Officers, please come in. I don't understand what this is about. The 3 policemen enter the house, and Boyd noticed that Lindsay had positioned herself near the staircase, as if preparing to flee. Her eyes were wide, her breathing rapid, and her hands were shaking slightly. To the officers, she looked like a terrified victim. Ma'am, Kowalski said gently, we received a call about a domestic disturbance. Are you Mrs. Hutchinson? Yes, Lindsay whispered, her voice barely audible. I don't know what to say. Mrs. Hutchinson, are you in immediate danger? The second officer, a young man Boyd didn't recognize, had his hand resting on his radio. Lindsay looked at Boyd, then at the officers, then seemed to make a decision. Yes, she said, her voice stronger. I think I am. My husband has been threatening me, and I've discovered that he's involved in criminal activities. Boyd felt a moment of pure admiration for Lindsay's performance. She was selling this perfectly, the reluctant victim finally finding the courage to speak out. Mrs. Hutchinson, Kowalski said, "We're going to need you to be more specific. What kind of threats has your husband made?" "He's been increasingly angry about my questions regarding his business dealings," Lindsay said, tears beginning to flow. "When I confronted him tonight about evidence I've found of illegal activities, he became violent. He grabbed me and threatened to hurt me if I talked to anyone about what I've discovered." All three officers turned to look at Boyd, who maintained his expression of confused innocence. "Officers, my wife is obviously upset about something, but I haven't threatened or touched her. We were having a discussion about some business documents she found, but there was no violence." "Sir," the young officer said, "we're going to need you to step outside while we speak with your wife privately." Boyd nodded cooperatively. "Of course. I want to help resolve this misunderstanding." As Boyd stepped onto the porch, he could hear Lindsay's voice through the open door, gaining strength and confidence as she told her story. She was accusing him of threatening her, of being involved with criminals, of using their marriage to hide illegal activities. She was painting herself as a victim who had finally found the courage to seek help. But what Lindsay didn't know was that Detective Kowalski was carrying a special recording device, one that had been provided by Boyd's people 3 days earlier. Every word of Lindsay's accusations was being captured in perfect digital clarity. After 20 minutes, Kowalski emerged from the house. "Mr. Hutchinson, based on your wife's statement, we're going to have to place you under arrest for domestic violence and intimidation of a witness." Boyd allowed himself to look shocked, hurt, and betrayed. "Ray, you've known me for 15 years. You know I would never hurt Lindsay." "I'm sorry, Boyd," Kowalski said quietly as he produced handcuffs. "I have to follow procedure." As the cuffs clicked around Boyd's wrists, he could see Lindsay watching from the window. Her expression was one of satisfaction mixed with what might have been genuine relief. She actually believed she had won. Boyd was placed in the back of the police car, and as they drove toward the station, he used his one allowed phone call to dial a number he had memorized but never expected to use. Mayor William Garrett answered on the second ring. "This is Bill." "Mr. Mayor, this is Boyd Hutchinson. I need to call on some very old debts." There was a pause. "What's the situation?" "My wife just had me arrested on false charges. She's working with Travis Kellerman to destroy me, and they've involved federal authorities. I need immediate intervention." "How immediate?" "I need to be out of custody within the hour, and I need the charges to disappear completely. More importantly, I need everyone to understand that I'm not the man they thought I was." Another pause. "Boyd, if I do this, there's no going back. People will know." "Let them know," Boyd said quietly. "It's time to stop pretending." 30 minutes later, Mayor Garrett burst into the Cedar Falls police station with an expression of barely controlled fury. Behind him were District Attorney Patricia Hendricks, Police Chief Robert Santos, and 3 men in expensive suits whom Boyd recognized as federal prosecutors. "Where is Boyd Hutchinson?" Garrett demanded, his voice echoing through the station. Detective Kowalski looked up from his paperwork, clearly startled. "Mr. Mayor, he's in holding. He was arrested on domestic violence charges." "Get those cuffs off now," Garrett shouted, loud enough for everyone in the building to hear. "And someone get his wife down here immediately." As the handcuffs were removed, Garrett turned to Boyd with an expression of profound apology. "I'm sorry this happened. We had no idea they would move this quickly." Boyd rubbed his wrists, noting that every police officer in the building was staring at him with new understanding. "It's not your fault, Bill. I should have acted sooner." When Lindsay arrived at the station 20 minutes later, clearly expecting to file additional charges against her husband, she found herself facing a very different situation. Boyd was standing free, surrounded by the most powerful people in the county, and everyone was looking at her with expressions of barely concealed hostility. "Mrs. Hutchinson," Mayor Garrett said, his voice cold and formal, "you've made a serious mistake tonight." Lindsay looked confused, then frightened, then desperate. "I don't understand. My husband threatened me." He's involved with criminals. Woman, Garrett said, his voice rising, you just destroyed your life. Who did you think you were playing with? And in that moment, Lindsay Hutchinson realized that she had never really known her husband at all. Chapter 4. The Revelation. The police station had never been quieter. Lindsay stood in the center of the room, surrounded by the most powerful figures in Cedar Falls, all of whom were looking at her as if she were something they'd scraped off their shoes. Boyd watched his wife's face cycle through confusion, fear, and a dawning understanding that her carefully laid plans had just collapsed completely. Mayor Garrett gestured toward his entourage. Mrs. Hutchinson, I'd like you to meet some people. This is District Attorney Patricia Hendricks, who's been investigating the corruption charges you're about to bring against your husband. This is Police Chief Santos, who's been wondering how you obtained confidential police information for your accusations. And these gentlemen are federal prosecutors who've been very interested in your boyfriend's background. Lindsay's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Travis Kellerman, said one of the federal prosecutors, a thin man with gray hair and predatory eyes. Real name, Travis Morrison. Wanted in California for real estate fraud, identity theft, and extortion. Currently under federal surveillance for conspiracy to commit fraud in municipal contracts. Boyd stepped forward, his demeanor completely transformed from the confused husband of an hour ago. Lindsay, you've been sleeping with a federal fugitive. You've been passing him classified information about municipal projects. And tonight, you try to destroy my life based on his instructions. Boyd, Lindsay started then stopped. For the first time since Boyd had known her, she seemed genuinely speechless. The recording device you had in your purse captured everything, District Attorney Hendricks said. Your accusations against your husband, your admission to accessing confidential documents, and some very interesting details about your relationship with Mr. Morrison. Lindsay's hand instinctively went to her purse. You can't use that. It's illegal to record someone without their consent. Boyd laughed, a sound completely devoid of humor. Lindsay, I've been recording every conversation in our house for the past 3 months. I know about every meeting with Travis, every lie you've told me, and every piece of classified information you've stolen. The only question now is whether you're going to cooperate with the federal investigation or whether you're going to prison. Mayor Garrett checked his watch. Mrs. Hutchinson, we have Travis Morrison in custody at the county jail. He's been very talkative since we arrested him an hour ago. According to his statement, this entire scheme was your idea. You approached him, you provided the information, and you convinced him to help you destroy your husband. That's not true. Lindsay's voice cracked. Travis planned everything. He told me Boyd was dangerous, that he was involved with criminals, that I needed to protect myself. Really? Boyd pulled out his phone and played a recorded conversation. Lindsay's voice filled the room. Boyd's just been convenient, stable income, nice house, and dumb enough to trust me completely. Lindsay staggered backward, as if she'd been physically struck. Where did you get that? The Grandview Hotel has been under federal surveillance for 6 months, Police Chief Santos explained. Every room is monitored. We have recordings of every meeting you had with Morrison, including your discussions about framing your husband for domestic violence and federal crimes. Boyd watched his wife's world crumble in real time. Her face had gone from pale to gray, and her hands were shaking uncontrollably. But he felt no sympathy, only a cold satisfaction that justice was finally being served. Here's what's going to happen, District Attorney Hendricks said. You're going to be charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, filing false police reports, and theft of classified documents. The federal prosecutors will determine whether additional charges apply. Your assets will be frozen pending investigation, and you'll be held without bail as a flight risk. But that's impossible, Lindsay whispered. Boyd doesn't have access to classified documents. He runs a construction company. Mayor Garrett exchanged a look with Boyd, who nodded slightly. It was time for the full truth. Mrs. Hutchinson, Garrett said, your husband doesn't just run a construction company. Boyd's family has been the unofficial power structure in this county for 3 generations. Every major municipal contract, every zoning decision, every significant business deal involves the Hutchinsons. Your husband has been handling classified information on behalf of the county government for over a decade. Boyd stepped closer to Lindsay, close enough that only she could hear his next words. I've been the unofficial mayor of this town since my father died. Every favor, every contact, every piece of influence you thought was criminal activity, it's all completely legal. It's all mine. Lindsay's legs gave out, and she sank into a nearby chair. But you work construction. You come home dirty. You watch football on Sundays. I work construction because I like building things, Boyd said. I come home dirty because I do honest work. And I watch football because it relaxes me after spending my weeks managing the economic future of this county. You married the most powerful man in Cedar Falls, and you never even realized it. One of the federal prosecutors stepped forward. Mrs. Hutchinson, your boyfriend has been trying to infiltrate municipal corruption networks throughout the state. He chose Cedar Falls because he thought it would be an easy target, a small town with small-time players. What he didn't realize is that Cedar Falls has been clean for 20 years specifically because the Hutchinsons have been rooting out corruption. Boyd's smile was razor-sharp. Travis thought he was playing me, but he was actually helping me identify and eliminate the last pockets of corruption in the county. Every person he approached, every bribe he offered, every illegal scheme he proposed, we documented all of it. Your boyfriend just helped us complete the largest anti-corruption operation in the state's history. Lindsay looked up at Boyd with an expression of complete devastation. You knew everything. I knew you were cheating on me 3 months ago, Boyd said. I knew about Travis's real identity 6 weeks ago. I knew about your plan to have me arrested 2 weeks ago. What I didn't know was how far you were willing to go to destroy me. Now I do. Police Chief Santos motioned to 2 officers. Mrs. Hutchinson, you're under arrest for conspiracy, filing false reports, and theft of government documents. You have the right to remain silent. As the handcuffs clicked around Lindsay's wrists, she looked at Boyd with something approaching desperation. Boyd, please. We were married for 12 years. That has to count for something. Boyd's expression didn't change. Those 12 years were apparently a lie. You said so yourself. I was just convenient. Stable income, nice house, and dumb enough to trust you completely. As Lindsay was led away, Mayor Garrett placed a hand on Boyd's shoulder. I'm sorry you had to go through this. Boyd shook his head. Don't be. This was necessary. Lindsay and Travis weren't just attacking me. They were attacking everything my family has built. They were threatening the stability of the entire county. They had to be stopped. What happens now? Boyd looked around the police station, noting how differently everyone was treating him now that his true position was public knowledge. Now we clean up the mess. Travis gets handed over to federal authorities. Lindsay goes to prison. And anyone else who might be thinking about betraying the Hutchinsons gets a very clear message about the consequences. And your marriage? Boyd's laugh was cold. My marriage ended the moment Lindsay decided to betray me. She'll discover that divorce from prison is considerably more complicated than divorce from freedom. As Boyd left the police station, he realized that the most difficult part of his plan was still ahead. Lindsay and Travis were neutralized, but there were others involved in their scheme, people who had helped them, people who had known about the plan and done nothing to stop it. Boyd Hutchinson was about to show all of them why his family had survived and thrived for 3 generations while others had fallen. The lesson would be thorough, permanent, and absolutely merciless. Chapter 5. The Network Unravels. The next morning, Boyd Hutchinson sat in his study at 6 a.m., surrounded by files that detailed every aspect of Lindsay and Travis's conspiracy. What he'd discovered in the 12 hours since their arrests was far more extensive than he'd initially realized. Their plan hadn't just involved destroying his reputation. It had been designed to trigger a complete restructuring of power in Cedar Falls. Boyd's phone rang. Tony Marcelli's gravelly voice filled the room. We got a problem, Boyd. Bigger than we thought. How much bigger? Your wife and her boyfriend weren't working alone. We've identified at least 8 other people involved in this scheme, including 3 city council members, a federal agent, and someone inside the state attorney general's office. Boyd felt his jaw tighten. Names. Council members Patricia Wells, David Reed, and Michael Torres. The federal agent is Special Agent Sarah Chun. She's been feeding information to Travis for months. The state contact is Assistant Attorney General Robert Kim. But here's the kicker. They've got financial backing from Consolidated Development Corporation. Boyd knew CDC, a massive real estate conglomerate that had been trying to establish a foothold in Cedar Falls for years. They've been blocked repeatedly by zoning restrictions and municipal contracts that favored local businesses. Now he understood why Travis had seemed so confident and well-funded. So this wasn't just about destroying my marriage, Boyd said. This was about destroying the entire local power structure. Exactly. CDC wanted to clear the way for major development projects. They figured if they could take you down and install their people in key positions, they could reshape the entire county. Your wife was just the entry point. Boyd stood up and walked to his window, looking out at the town his family had protected for 3 generations. The idea that outsiders had come so close to destroying everything his grandfather and father had built filled him with a cold rage that was unlike anything he'd ever experienced. Tony, I want a complete dossier on every person involved within 24 hours. Financial records, communications, personal connections, weaknesses, everything. Already started. Mickey's handling the financial traces, Frank's got people working on the communication records, and Detective Kowalski is providing access to official files. We'll have everything by tomorrow morning. Boyd hung up and immediately dialed another number. District Attorney Patricia Hendricks answered on the first ring. Boyd, I was hoping you'd call. We've got some complications, such as Travis Morrison is demanding a lawyer, and he's hinting that he has information about federal crimes that could bring down multiple government officials. He wants immunity in exchange for testimony. Boyd smiled grimly. Let him think he's getting immunity. I want to know everything he's willing to reveal before we decide his fate. There's something else. I got a call from a state attorney general's office. They're sending investigators to review the charges against your wife. Apparently, there are questions about the legality of the surveillance evidence. Who specifically is raising these questions? Assistant Attorney General Robert Kim. Boyd felt a surge of satisfaction. The network was revealing itself exactly as he'd hoped. Patricia, I need you to stall any state investigation for 72 hours. Tell them you're still processing federal evidence. I can do that, but Boyd, if Kim is dirty, this could go all the way to the governor's office. Let me worry about the governor. Just buy me 3 days. Boyd's next call was to Mayor Garrett. Bill, we need to talk. My office, 1 hour. How bad is it? Worse than we thought, but not worse than we can handle. Bring Chief Santos and anyone else you trust completely. An hour later, Boyd's study was filled with the most powerful, legitimate officials in Cedar Falls. Mayor Garrett, Police Chief Santos, District Attorney Hendricks, and Judge Margaret Flynn, Boyd's father's goddaughter and one of the most respected jurists in the state. Boyd spread the preliminary files across his desk. Ladies and gentlemen, Lindsay and Travis were part of a conspiracy involving at least 8 other people and financed by Consolidated Development Corporation. The plan was to destroy me, install their people in key municipal positions, and reshape the entire county for their benefit. Judge Flynn examined the documents. This is extensive. How long have they been planning this? At least 18 months. CDC has been studying our municipal structure, identifying key relationships, and mapping out exactly how to disrupt our local control systems. They chose Lindsay as their entry point because she had access to my network and my information. Police Chief Santos looked grim. 3 of our city council members are involved. If this gets out before we can handle it properly, it could trigger a complete collapse of municipal government, which is exactly what CDC wants, Boyd said. Chaos creates opportunities for outside intervention. If they can destabilize our local government, they can justify bringing in state and federal oversight. Once that happens, they can manipulate the rebuilding process to their advantage. Mayor Garrett studied a financial report. Boyd, these numbers show that CDC has been planning to invest over $200 million in Cedar Falls development projects. They're not just trying to get a foothold. They're planning to completely transform the county. Boyd nodded, which means we need to move quickly and decisively. We can't just arrest the local conspirators and hope the problem goes away. We need to destroy CDC's entire operation and send a message that will prevent anyone else from trying something similar. District Attorney Hendricks looked concerned. Boyd, we're talking about taking on a corporation with billions in assets and connections throughout the federal government. Are you sure we have the resources for this kind of fight? Boyd's smile was predatory. Patricia, my family has been accumulating favors, connections, and resources for 70 years. CDC made the mistake of attacking us on our home ground, using people who owe us their careers. This isn't going to be a fair fight. It's going to be a massacre. Judge Flynn leaned forward. What do you need from us? I need arrest warrants for the 3 dirty council members, sealed until I give the word. I need surveillance authorization for CDC's operations throughout the state. And I need a federal prosecutor who's completely clean and completely loyal. I can provide the warrants and surveillance authorization, Flynn said. For the federal prosecutor, you'll need to go higher. Boyd pulled out his phone and dialed a number that few people in Cedar Falls even knew existed. The call was answered immediately. Governor's office, this is Helen. Helen, this is Boyd Hutchinson. I need to speak with the governor immediately. Tell him it's about the CDC situation. There was a brief pause. Hold, please, Mr. Hutchinson. Governor James Morrison, no relation to Travis, came on the line within 30 seconds. Boyd, I've been expecting your call. How bad is the infiltration? State level, including someone in the Attorney General's office. We're dealing with a coordinated attack on municipal government funded by outside interests. I need clean federal resources. You'll have them. I'm assigning Special Prosecutor Amanda Walsh to your case. She reports directly to me, and she has authority to override anyone in the Attorney General's office. How long do you need? 72 hours to complete the local arrests. Another week to dismantle CDC's entire operation. Done. Boyd, when this is over, we're going to need to have a conversation about formalizing your family's role in state government. I understand, Governor. As Boyd hung up, he looked around the room at the faces of people who had just realized they were witnessing the emergence of a power structure that had existed in the shadows for decades. Ladies and gentlemen, Boyd said, for 3 generations, my family has protected this county from exactly this kind of outside interference. We've done it quietly, carefully, and always within the bounds of the law. But CDC and their local conspirators have forced us into the open. What happens next will determine whether Cedar Falls remains an independent community or becomes another corporate conquest. Mayor Garrett cleared his throat. What do you need us to do? Boyd's expression was granite hard. Tomorrow morning, we begin the systematic destruction of everyone who betrayed this community. We start with the 3 council members, move on to the federal agent, and finish with CDC itself. By the time we're done, no one will ever again mistake Cedar Falls for an easy target. As the meeting broke up, Boyd remained in his study, staring at the photos of his grandfather and father on the wall. They had built an empire of influence through patience, intelligence, and ruthless efficiency. Now, it was Boyd's turn to prove that the Hutchinson legacy would endure for another generation. Lindsay and Travis had thought they were destroying one man's life. Instead, they had awakened something far more dangerous, a family that had been waiting 70 years for someone to give them a reason to show their true power. The reckoning was about to begin. Chapter 6, The Reckoning Begins. By dawn on Friday, Boyd Hutchinson had positioned his pieces like a chess grandmaster preparing for checkmate. The next 24 hours would determine whether his family's 70-year reign over Cedar Falls would continue or whether outside forces would successfully destroy everything his grandfather had built. At 6 a.m., Boyd met with Tony Marcelli in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. The building had been used for sensitive discussions by the Hutchinson family for decades, and its soundproofed rooms and untraceable phone lines made it ideal for coordinating complex operations. Tell me everything, Boyd said as he settled into a chair that had been positioned to face a wall covered with photographs, documents, and connection diagrams. Tony consulted a thick folder. Councilmember Patricia Wells has been taking CDC money for 8 months. They've got her on recorded phone calls discussing how to manipulate zoning laws to favor their projects. David Reed owes them $300,000 in gambling debts. They own him completely. Michael Torres is sleeping with a CDC executive, and they've got video evidence. Boyd studied the photographs of the 3 council members. He'd known all of them for years, had attended their children's graduations, their anniversary parties, their campaign events. The betrayal was personal as well as political. What about the federal agent? Special Agent Sarah Chun has been feeding information to Travis for 6 months. She's been using her FBI credentials to access classified municipal records and sharing them with CDC. But here's the interesting part. She doesn't know about CDC's involvement. She thinks she's working directly for Travis. So she's expendable to them. Completely. Which gives us leverage. Boyd moved to the communications records. Show me the CDC connection. Tony spread out a series of financial documents. Consolidated Development Corporation established a subsidiary called Mountain View Properties specifically to handle the Cedar Falls operation. They've invested $12 million so far, with plans to invest another $100 million once they gain municipal control. Personnel. The operation is being run by CDC Vice President Jennifer Walsh. Boyd looked up sharply. Walsh. Any relation to the special prosecutor the governor assigned? Boyd was already reaching for his phone. We're about to find out. Amanda Walsh answered on the first ring. This is Special Prosecutor Walsh. Ms. Walsh, this is Boyd Hutchinson. I need to ask you a direct question, and I need a direct answer. Do you have any family members working for Consolidated Development Corporation? There was a long pause. Why would you ask that? Because CDC is running the conspiracy we're investigating, and their operation is being managed by someone named Jennifer Walsh. Another pause, longer this time. Jennifer Walsh is my sister, but I haven't spoken to her in 5 years, and I didn't know she was involved in this case. Boyd felt a surge of adrenaline. This was either an incredible coincidence or the most sophisticated trap he'd ever encountered. Ms. Walsh, I'm going to need you to make a choice. Either you recuse yourself from this case immediately, or you help me destroy your sister's operation completely. Mr. Hutchinson, I took an oath to uphold the law regardless of personal relationships. If my sister is involved in federal crimes, she'll face the consequences. Boyd smiled grimly. Amanda Walsh had just passed the most important test of her career. Good, because we're about to give you evidence that will send her to prison for 20 years. At 8 a.m., the first arrest began. Councilmember Patricia Wells was taken into custody at her home as she prepared to leave for work. David Reed was arrested at his office. Michael Torres was picked up at the golf course. All 3 were charged with conspiracy, bribery, and corruption of public officials. By 9 a.m., news of the arrest had spread throughout Cedar Falls. The local media was in chaos. The remaining council members were in emergency session, and every city employee was wondering if they were next. Boyd watched the developing chaos from his office while fielding calls from concerned business leaders, worried citizens, and reporters from regional news outlets. He gave the same carefully crafted response to each caller. The county is experiencing some personnel changes, but municipal services will continue without interruption. At 10 a.m., Special Agent Sarah Chun was arrested by federal marshals at the FBI field office in the state capitol. The charges included abuse of federal authority, conspiracy to commit fraud, and violation of the Espionage Act. Her arrest sent shockwaves through the federal law enforcement community. Boyd's phone rang at 10:30. It was Travis Morrison, calling from the county jail. "You son of a bitch," Travis said without preamble. "You've destroyed everything." "Not everything," Boyd replied calmly. "Not yet. I want to make a deal. I'll give you information about CDC's other operations throughout the state in exchange for immunity." Boyd laughed. "Travis, you're not in a position to negotiate. You're going to federal prison for 20 years minimum. The only question is whether your cell has a window. You don't understand. CDC has operations in 12 states. They've been systematically corrupting municipal governments for 5 years. The Cedar Falls operation was just a pilot program. This was new information, and Boyd felt his interest sharpen. Keep talking. They have a list of 30 target communities, all similar to Cedar Falls. Small enough to control, wealthy enough to be worth the effort, and isolated enough that outside interference is unlikely. They've already begun operations in 6 other locations. Boyd considered this. If CDC was operating a nationwide conspiracy to corrupt municipal governments, then the Cedar Falls operation was far more significant than he'd realized. Destroying it completely could protect not just his community, but dozens of others. Travis, you're going to tell Special Prosecutor Walsh everything you know about CDC's operations. Every name, every location, every scheme. In exchange, I'll make sure you're housed in a federal facility rather than a state prison. You'll still serve 20 years, but you'll live to tell your story. And if I don't cooperate, Boyd's voice dropped to a whisper, then you'll discover what happens to people who threaten my family. Travis, you tried to destroy everything my grandfather and father built. You used my wife to attack my life's work. You brought criminals and corruption into my community. Do you really think I'm going to let you walk away from this? There was a long silence. I'll talk to the prosecutor. Smart choice. At noon, Boyd met with Mayor Garrett, Police Chief Santos, and the remaining city council members in the municipal building's emergency conference room. The mood was tense, with everyone trying to understand how 3 of their colleagues had been corrupted without anyone realizing it. Ladies and gentlemen, Boyd said, what happened here was not an accident. Cedar Falls was targeted by Consolidated Development Corporation because we represent something they want to control, a stable, prosperous community with strong local government and minimal outside interference. Council member Janet Morrison, an elderly woman who had served the community for 20 years, looked shaken. Boyd, how do we not see this coming? Because they were very good at what they do, Boyd replied. CDC has spent years studying communities like ours, identifying weaknesses and developing strategies to exploit them. They chose their targets carefully and moved slowly to avoid detection. What happens now? Asked Councilmember Robert Hayes. Boyd stood and walked to the window, looking out at the town square where his grandfather had once operated a small construction office and his father had expanded the family's influence throughout the region. Now we show CDC and anyone else who might be watching that Cedar Falls is not available for conquest. We expose their entire operation, prosecute everyone involved, and make it clear that attacking this community will result in consequences far beyond anything they can imagine. Mayor Garrett leaned forward. Boyd, the state media is starting to pick up this story. By tonight, we're going to have reporters from major outlets asking questions about corruption in municipal government. How do we handle that? Boyd turned back to the group with a smile that was both confident and slightly predatory. We tell him the truth. Cedar Falls identified and eliminated a conspiracy to corrupt our government. We did it quickly, efficiently, and completely. And we did it without any outside assistance because we protect our own. As the meeting broke up, Boyd remained behind with Mayor Garrett. Bill, there's something else you need to know. This operation extends far beyond Cedar Falls. CDC has been targeting municipalities throughout the region, and we may be the only community that successfully fought back. What does that mean for us? Boyd's expression was granite hard. It means that what we do in the next 48 hours will determine whether dozens of other communities fall victim to CDC's schemes. We're not just fighting for Cedar Falls anymore. We're fighting for the principle that local communities can't be bought and sold by corporate interests. And if we lose, Boyd's smile was cold. We won't lose. My family has been protecting this community for 70 years, and we're not going to stop now. CDC made the mistake of attacking us directly. Now they're going to learn why that was the worst decision they ever made. As Boyd left the municipal building, he realized that the next phase of his plan would require him to abandon any pretense of operating within normal legal and business channels. CDC had declared war on his family and his community. It was time to show them what a real war looked like. Chapter 7. The Empire Strikes Back. At 3 a.m. on Saturday morning, Boyd Hutchinson stood in the command center he'd established in the warehouse, surrounded by monitors displaying financial data, communication intercepts, and surveillance footage from 12 states. What had begun as a simple matter of dealing with his cheating wife had evolved into the largest anti-corruption operation in regional history. Special Prosecutor Amanda Walsh had arrived from the state capitol at midnight, bringing with her a team of federal investigators and enough evidence to prosecute CDC executives in multiple jurisdictions. Her decision to pursue her sister's prosecution with ruthless efficiency had impressed Boyd and convinced him that she could be trusted completely. Mr. Hutchinson, Amanda said, pointing to a financial chart, CDC's operation is more extensive than we initially realized. They've invested over $50 million in municipal corruption schemes across 6 states. The Cedar Falls operation was actually one of their smaller investments. Boyd studied the data. Show me their biggest operation. Amanda pulled up files on a town called Millbrook Heights in Colorado. Population 40,000, similar economic profile to Cedar Falls. CDC began their operation there 18 months ago. They've corrupted the mayor, half the city council, and the police chief. They're currently in the process of seizing control of municipal water rights, which they plan to sell to agricultural interests for $200 million. Status of local resistance? Non-existent. The few officials who tried to oppose them were either bought off or destroyed through manufactured scandals. Millbrook Heights is now completely under CDC control. Boyd felt his jaw tighten. How many other communities are in similar situations? For that we know of. 2 in Montana, 1 in Wyoming, and 1 in Nevada. In each case, CDC spent months identifying key municipal officials, then systematically corrupted or eliminated them. The pattern is identical to what they attempted here. Tony Marcelli looked up from a communications console. Boyd, we've got a problem. CDC just activated what appears to be a crisis response protocol. They're moving money out of the country, destroying records, and evacuating key personnel. How do you know? Jennifer Walsh, the special prosecutor's sister, just boarded a private jet to the Cayman Islands. 3 other CDC executives are en route to Switzerland. They're shutting down the entire operation. Boyd felt a surge of cold anger. CDC was attempting to escape justice by abandoning their schemes and fleeing the country with their profits. The communities they corrupted would be left in chaos, while the executives responsible lived in luxury abroad. Amanda, Boyd said, how quickly can you freeze CDC's assets? I can get federal asset seizure orders within 6 hours, but only for funds currently in U.S. banks. If they're moving money offshore, we'll need international cooperation, which could take months. Boyd walked to his communication station and began making calls. The first was to Governor Morrison. Governor, CDC is attempting to flee the country with the proceeds of their corruption schemes. I need immediate federal intervention to freeze all assets and prevent further transfers. Boyd, I can get you emergency asset seizure orders, but I'll need probable cause documentation for federal crimes. You'll have it within an hour. But Governor, there's something else. CDC has successfully corrupted municipal governments in at least 4 other states. This operation needs to expand beyond regional jurisdiction. There was a pause. Are you asking me to contact other governors? I'm asking you to coordinate a multi-state response that will destroy CDC completely and protect every community they've targeted. This can't be handled as separate local investigations. We need a coordinated national operation. Boyd, you're talking about one of the largest corporate prosecutions in recent history. Are you certain you have the evidence to support something this extensive? Boyd looked around the command center at the mountains of evidence his team had compiled. Governor, when we're done, CDC will be nothing but a memory, and every executive involved will spend the rest of their lives in federal prison. 2 hours later, Boyd's operation had expanded to include law enforcement agencies from 6 states, federal prosecutors from 3 regional offices, and asset seizure teams from the Treasury Department. The scale of the response was unprecedented for a municipal corruption case. But Boyd wasn't finished. CDC had made the mistake of attacking his family and his community, and he was determined to ensure that no trace of their organization survived. At 8 a.m., Boyd received a call from Mickey Torino. We've got movement on the CDC executives who are still in the country. Jennifer Walsh's jet was forced to land in Miami. Federal marshals are waiting for her. 2 other executives were arrested at JFK, trying to board flights to Europe. What about their domestic operations? We've identified CDC field offices in 12 cities. Federal teams are moving to seize records and arrest personnel simultaneously. The entire network is being rolled up. Boyd felt a grim satisfaction. CDC had spent years building their corruption network, and he was destroying it in a matter of hours. But the most important call came at 10 a.m. from Amanda Walsh. Mr. Hutchinson, we've recovered CDC's complete operational files. They had detailed plans for corrupting municipal governments in over 30 communities nationwide. The scope of this conspiracy is far beyond anything we initially imagined. How far beyond? They were planning to control municipal government in every economically attractive small city west of the Mississippi River. Water rights, zoning authority, tax policy, municipal contracts, they wanted to control it all. The ultimate goal was to create a network of corporate-controlled municipalities that could be manipulated for massive profit. Boyd stared out the window at Cedar Falls, thinking about his grandfather's determination to protect the community from outside control, his father's expansion of that protection throughout the region, and his own commitment to preserving local independence. Amanda, how many communities did we just save? Dozens, maybe hundreds. If CDC had succeeded here, they would have had the model and resources to expand nationwide. Your successful resistance broke their entire strategy. At noon, Boyd gathered his core team in the warehouse for a final briefing. The arrests were complete, the assets were frozen, and CDC's entire operation had been dismantled. But there was still one piece of unfinished business. Lindsay and Travis, Boyd said, they're the ones who brought this plague to our community. Their sentencing hearing is scheduled for next week. District Attorney Patricia Hendricks consulted her files. Travis is looking at 25 years federal time. Lindsay could get 15 years, but her lawyer is arguing for reduced sentencing based on her cooperation. Boyd's expression was stone cold. She didn't cooperate. She was caught, and she would have destroyed not just me, but everything my family has protected for 3 generations. Boyd, Amanda Walsh said carefully, Lindsay is your wife. The court will expect some consideration of your wishes regarding her sentencing. Boyd's smile was razor sharp. The court will get my wishes. I want both of them to serve maximum sentences in federal facilities with no possibility of parole. I want them to understand that betraying the Hutchinson family carries consequences that last a lifetime. Tony Marcelli looked uncomfortable. Boyd, are you sure? 15 years is a long time for someone who was essentially manipulated by outside forces. Boyd turned to face his oldest friend and most trusted ally. Tony, Lindsay wasn't manipulated. She made calculated decisions to betray me, to steal classified information, and to help destroy our community. She did it for money, for excitement, and because she thought I was weak enough to forgive her. Boyd walked to the wall where photographs of his grandfather and father hung alongside images of Cedar Falls from different eras. My grandfather taught me that loyalty is the foundation of everything we've built. My father taught me that betrayal, once forgiven, invites more betrayal. Lindsay and Travis will serve their full sentences, and everyone in this region will understand that attacking the Hutchinson family is a mistake you make only once. As Boyd left the warehouse, he felt a profound sense of completion. CDC was destroyed, their executives were in custody, and dozens of communities would remain free from corporate control. Lindsay and Travis would spend the next 20 years in federal prison, thinking about their decision to betray the most powerful family in the region. But more importantly, Boyd had proved that the Hutchinson legacy would continue for another generation. His grandfather's empire of influence had not only survived its greatest challenge, it had emerged stronger, more visible, and more respected than ever. The war was over. Boyd Hutchinson had won completely. Chapter 8. Justice Served. The federal courthouse in Cedar Falls had never hosted a sentencing hearing that drew so much attention. Representatives from 6 state governments, federal prosecutors from multiple jurisdictions, and media outlets from across the region had gathered to witness the conclusion of what legal experts were already calling the largest municipal corruption case in modern history. Boyd Hutchinson sat in the front row of the courtroom, wearing the same dark suit he'd worn to his father's funeral 5 years earlier. His expression was composed, professional, and completely unforgiving. Beside him sat Mayor Garrett, District Attorney Hendricks, and Special Prosecutor Amanda Walsh, who had become the face of the multi-state investigation that had destroyed CDC completely. Lindsay sat at the defendant's table with her court-appointed attorney, a young public defender who had drawn the impossible task of arguing for leniency in a case that had captured national attention. She looked smaller than Boyd remembered, her honey-colored hair now dull and unkempt, her face gaunt from months of stress and poor jail food. She had not once looked in Boyd's direction since entering the courtroom. Travis Morrison sat at a separate table with his attorney, expensive defense lawyer from Chicago who had flown in specifically for this case. Travis appeared defiant, his jaw set and his eyes fixed on some point above the judge's head. He had refused to accept responsibility for his actions and continued to claim that he had been manipulated by CDC executives who were now beyond his reach. Judge Margaret Flynn entered the courtroom at precisely 2 p.m., her expression grave and her demeanor reflecting the historical significance of the proceedings. Flynn had been handling high-profile cases for 20 years, but this was the first time she had presided over a sentencing that would determine the fate of a conspiracy spanning multiple states. Ladies and gentlemen, Judge Flynn began, we are here to conclude the sentencing phase of United States versus Morrison and United States versus Hutchinson. The defendants have been convicted of conspiracy to commit fraud, corruption of public officials, theft of classified documents, and multiple other federal crimes. Before I announce their sentences, I want to address the broader significance of this case. Flynn paused, looking around the packed courtroom. What happened in Cedar Falls represents an attack on the fundamental principle of local self-governance. The defendants, working with Consolidated Development Corporation, attempted to corrupt and control municipal government for private profit. They were stopped not by federal oversight or state intervention, but by the vigilance and determination of local citizens who refused to allow their community to be bought and sold. Boyd felt a surge of pride as Flynn continued her remarks. The judge was making it clear that the successful resistance to CDC's scheme was a victory for communities everywhere. Mr. Morrison, Flynn said, addressing Travis directly, you came to Cedar Falls as a predator, seeking to exploit the trust and stability of a close-knit community. You used deception, manipulation, and corruption to advance your goals. You showed no respect for the people you were harming and no remorse for the damage you were causing. Travis finally looked up, meeting the judge's gaze with something approaching defiance. The court sentences you to 25 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. You will serve your sentence at ADX Florence, where your ability to harm other communities will be permanently eliminated. A murmur ran through the courtroom. ADX Florence was the highest security federal facility in the country, reserved for the most dangerous criminals. Sending Travis, there was Judge Flynn's way of ensuring that he would never again be able to participate in any form of organized criminal activity. Mrs. Hutchinson, Flynn said, turning to Lindsay, who finally looked up with tears streaming down her face. Your case presents particular challenges for this court. You were married to one of the most respected citizens in this region, a man whose family has contributed to the stability and prosperity of this community for 3 generations. Boyd watched his wife's face as Judge Flynn continued. You had access to classified information, financial resources, and social connections that most people could only dream of. Instead of honoring the trust placed in you, you chose to use those advantages to attack the very community that had embraced you. Lindsay was sobbing now, her shoulders shaking as she tried to maintain some semblance of composure. Your betrayal was not the result of desperation or manipulation. It was the result of greed, selfishness, and a complete disregard for the vows you made and the trust you accepted. The court has reviewed the evidence extensively, including recordings of your own words describing your husband as dumb enough to trust completely and your marriage as merely convenient. Boyd felt no sympathy as he watched Lindsay realize that her own recorded statements were being used to justify her sentence. Mrs. Hutchinson, The court sentences you to 20 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. You will serve your sentence at FCI Dublin, where you will have ample time to consider the consequences of betraying the people who loved and trusted you. The courtroom erupted in whispers and movement as reporters rushed to file their stories and court officials moved to process the defendants. 20 years was significantly more than Lindsay's attorney had anticipated, and the decision to deny parole meant that she would remain in federal prison until she was nearly 60 years old. As the defendants were led away in handcuffs, Lindsay turned for one final look at Boyd. Her expression was a mixture of desperation, regret, and something that might have been an appeal for forgiveness. Boyd's expression didn't change. He watched his wife disappear through the courthouse doors with the same cold indifference he might show to any other criminal being led to prison. After the courtroom cleared, Boyd found himself standing alone with Judge Flynn in the hallway outside the courtroom. "Boyd," she said quietly, "I hope you find some peace in this outcome." "Justice isn't about peace," Boyd replied. "It's about consequences. Lindsay and Travis chose to betray everything I've spent my life building. Now they'll live with the consequences of that choice for the next 20 years. And CDC?" Boyd's smile was grim. "Completely destroyed. 53 executives arrested across 6 states, all assets seized, and every municipal operation shut down. They'll never threaten another community." Judge Flynn nodded approvingly. "Your grandfather would be proud. So would your father." As Boyd left the courthouse, he was approached by a cluster of reporters seeking comments on the sentencing. He paused on the courthouse steps, looking out at the town square where his grandfather had first established the family's presence in Cedar Falls. "Ladies and gentlemen," Boyd said, "today's sentencing sends a clear message that communities like Cedar Falls cannot be bought, sold, or corrupted by outside interests. My family has protected this region for 3 generations, and we will continue to do so for 3 more. Mr. Hutchinson," called a reporter from the state capitol, "do you have any message for your wife?" Boyd's expression was stone cold. Lindsay Hutchinson made her choices. Now she'll live with the consequences. I have no wife. As Boyd walked away from the courthouse, he felt the weight of his family's history settling on his shoulders. His grandfather had built an empire through determination and ruthless efficiency. His father had expanded that empire while maintaining its core principles. Now Boyd had proved that the empire would survive and prosper into the next generation. Lindsay and Travis were finished. CDC was destroyed. And every person in the region who might be considering betraying the Hutchinson family had just received a very clear message about the consequences of such betrayal. The war was over. Boyd Hutchinson had won completely, permanently, and without mercy. Chapter 9. The New Order. 6 months after the sentencing, Boyd Hutchinson stood in his study, reviewing reports from across the region that documented the complete transformation of Cedar Falls and its surrounding communities. The destruction of CDC and the prosecution of their local conspirators had created a power vacuum that Boyd had systematically filled with loyal allies and carefully chosen successors. The 3 corrupted city council members had been replaced through special elections with candidates personally selected by Boyd. The new mayor, Patricia Santos, Chief Santos's sister and a longtime family friend, had proven remarkably effective at implementing Boyd's vision for municipal development. The entire municipal government was now staffed by people who understood that their positions existed at Boyd's discretion. More importantly, Boyd's role as the unofficial power broker for the region was no longer hidden. Governor Morrison had formally appointed him as special advisor for municipal affairs, a position that gave him official authority to coordinate anti-corruption efforts throughout the state. Federal authorities had designated him as a permanent consultant for investigations involving municipal conspiracy, which effectively made him untouchable by outside interference. But the most satisfying development was the fate of the communities CDC had targeted. Millbrook Heights, Colorado, had been liberated from corporate control after Boyd provided federal authorities with evidence of CDC's operations there. The corrupted officials were arrested, CDC's assets were seized, and the community's water rights were restored to municipal control. Similar operations had freed 4 other communities from CDC's influence. Boyd's phone rang, interrupting his review of the monthly reports. Tony Marcelli's voice filled the room. "Boyd, we've got a situation. Someone's been asking questions about the family business. Looks like we might have a new problem." Boyd felt his interest sharpen. "What kind of questions?" "A private investigator from Chicago has been nosing around, asking about your connections, your family's history, and specifically about what happened to Lindsay and Travis. He's representing someone who wants to remain anonymous." Boyd smiled grimly. "Any theories about who might be paying for this investigation?" "Could be CDC's insurance company looking for grounds to avoid paying claims. Could be federal prosecutors from outside our region trying to build a case. Or it could be someone connected to Lindsay or Travis who thinks they can find grounds for an appeal." Boyd considered the possibilities. After his complete victory over CDC, it was inevitable that someone would eventually challenge his family's control. The question was whether this new threat was serious enough to require immediate action. "Tony, I want complete background information on this investigator within 24 hours. Financial records, client history, personal connections. If someone thinks they can threaten what we've built, they need to understand the consequences." "Already on it. Mickey's handling the financial traces, and Frank's got people looking into his personal life. We'll know everything about him by tomorrow morning." Boyd hung up and walked to the window overlooking the town square. Cedar Falls had never been more prosperous or more stable. Municipal contracts were being awarded to local businesses, tax revenue was up 30%, and unemployment was at historic lows. The removal of outside interference had allowed the community to thrive in ways that would have been impossible under CDC's control. But prosperity and stability came at a price that few people in Cedar Falls fully understood. Boyd's control over the community was absolute and unforgiving. Local businesses succeeded or failed based on their loyalty to the Hutchinson family. Political careers were made or destroyed by Boyd's approval. Even social relationships were influenced by proximity to the family's power structure. Boyd's reflection was interrupted by a knock on his study door. "Come in." Mayor Patricia Santos entered, carrying a folder that Boyd recognized as containing updates on ongoing municipal projects. "Boyd, I wanted to discuss the Henderson development proposal and the new water treatment facility funding." As Patricia briefed him on municipal affairs, Boyd reflected on how completely his life had changed since Lindsay's betrayal. 6 months ago, he had been a successful businessman with hidden influence. Now he was the acknowledged ruler of an entire region, with official government recognition and virtually unlimited authority. The transformation had come at a personal cost that Boyd was only beginning to understand. He lived alone in the house he had shared with Lindsay, surrounded by reminders of a marriage that had been built on lies. He had no close personal relationships outside of his business associates, and no prospect of ever again trusting someone enough to share his life. But Boyd felt no regret about the choices he had made. Lindsay's betrayal had revealed weaknesses in his approach to power that could have eventually destroyed everything his family had built. By responding with overwhelming force and absolute ruthlessness, he had eliminated those weaknesses permanently. At 8 p.m., Boyd received an unexpected visitor. Detective Ray Kowalski, now promoted to chief of detectives, arrived at the house carrying information about the private investigator. "Boyd, we've identified the Chicago investigator. His name is David Chun, and he's not working for CDC's insurance company or any federal prosecutors. He's working for Lindsay." Boyd felt his jaw tighten. "Explain." "Lindsay's been working with a group of federal inmates to appeal her conviction. They're claiming that the evidence against her was obtained illegally and that she was denied effective counsel. This investigator is trying to find grounds for overturning her sentence." Boyd laughed, a sound completely devoid of humor. "Lindsay thinks she can escape justice by challenging the investigation that exposed her crimes. It gets worse. She's also been in contact with journalists who are interested in writing a book about the case. They're planning to portray her as a victim of an overzealous prosecution and you as a corrupt local power broker who manipulated the legal system for personal revenge." Boyd felt a surge of cold anger that was unlike anything he had experienced since Lindsay's original betrayal. His ex-wife was attempting to destroy his reputation and undermine everything he had accomplished, even for federal prison. Ray, I want you to arrange a meeting with Lindsay. I'm going to visit her in federal prison and explain exactly what will happen if she continues this campaign. Boyd, that might not be wise. Any contact between you and Lindsay could be used to support her claims about prosecutorial misconduct. Boyd's smile was predatory. Let her try. I'm a special advisor to the governor and a federal consultant. My conversations with federal prisoners are protected by official privilege. 2 days later, Boyd sat across from Lindsay in the visiting room at FCI Dublin, separated by reinforced glass and speaking through monitored telephone lines. Lindsay looked older, thinner, and harder than he remembered, but her eyes still held the same calculating intelligence that had once attracted him. "Hello, Boyd," she said, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "Lindsay, I understand you've been busy. I've been fighting for my freedom, something you made sure I'd have to do from prison." Boyd leaned forward, his expression stone cold. "Let me explain something to you. The investigation that put you here was completely legal and thoroughly documented. Your conviction was based on evidence that you provided yourself through your own recorded statements. Any attempt to overturn that conviction will fail. We'll see about that." "No, Lindsay, we won't see about that. Because if you continue this campaign, I will destroy not just you, but everyone associated with your appeals process. Your lawyers will lose their licenses, your journalist friends will find themselves unable to get their stories published, and your fellow inmates will discover that challenging the Hutchinson family carries consequences even inside federal prison." Lindsay's face went pale. "You can't threaten me. This conversation is being recorded." Boyd's smile was razor sharp. "I'm not threatening you, Lindsay. I'm explaining the natural consequences of your choices. You tried to destroy me once and failed. If you try again, the results will be far worse than 20 years in federal prison." "What are you saying?" Boyd stood up, preparing to leave. "I'm saying that you have one chance to accept your sentence and serve your time quietly. If you continue to challenge your conviction or attempt to damage my reputation, you'll discover that federal prison is not the worst thing that can happen to someone who betrays the Hutchinson family." As Boyd walked away, he heard Lindsay shouting into the phone, but he didn't turn around. He had delivered his message clearly and completely. If Lindsay was smart, she would abandon her appeals and accept the consequences of her betrayal. If she wasn't smart, she would learn why challenging his family was a mistake that people made only once. 3 weeks later, Tony Marcelli called with news that confirmed Boyd's assessment of the situation. Lindsay's withdrawn all her appeals and fired her lawyers. The private investigator has returned to Chicago, and the journalists have dropped their book project. Boyd felt a grim satisfaction. She finally understood. "Looks like it. There's something else, though. I've been getting calls from other communities asking for our help with similar problems. Apparently, word has spread about how we handled the CDC situation." Boyd considered this development. His family had always focused on protecting Cedar Falls and the immediate region, but their successful resistance to corporate corruption had attracted attention from communities throughout the state and beyond. How many communities? 7 so far from 3 different states. They're all dealing with outside interference, corporate corruption, federal overreach, or criminal organizations trying to establish control. They want to hire us as consultants. Boyd smiled. His grandfather had built a local empire. His father had expanded it regionally. Now Boyd had the opportunity to create something unprecedented, a network of protected communities that could resist any form of outside control. Set up meetings with representatives from each community. If they're serious about protecting their independence, we'll help them. But they need to understand that working with the Hutchinson family means accepting our methods and our authority. As Boyd hung up the phone, he realized that Lindsay's betrayal had ultimately led to the greatest expansion of his family's influence in 3 generations. What had begun as a simple matter of dealing with a cheating wife had evolved into the foundation of a new order that could protect dozens of communities from outside interference. Boyd Hutchinson had not just survived his wife's betrayal. He had used it to transform himself from a regional power broker into something approaching a shadow government for independent communities throughout the American West. The Hutchinson legacy would continue not just for another generation, but potentially for centuries to come. And it would be built on the absolute principle that betrayal, once attempted, would be met with swift, complete, and merciless consequences. Lindsay and Travis had thought they were destroying one man's life. Instead, they had awakened an empire that would reshape the balance of power throughout the region for decades to come. Boyd Hutchinson had won completely, permanently, and beyond anything his grandfather could have imagined. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Chapter 1. The Night Shift. Wesley Blanchard pushed his mop cart through the polished marble corridors of Con Industries' executive floor, his reflection ghosting across the gleaming surface. 11:47 p.m. The building was a cathedral of silence at this hour, broken only by the whisper of his rubber-soled shoes and the distant hum of HVAC systems pumping filtered air through 43 floors of American corporate ambition. 5 years. 5 years since Stella died, and Wesley had spent every single night of the last 18 months in this building, working his way up from lobby maintenance to executive floor custodian. Everyone saw the uniform, the mop, the quiet man who kept his head down. No one saw the MIT graduate who once ran his own consulting firm. No one remembered the man whose wife's accidental fall from a downtown parking garage had never sat right with him. Evening, Wesley, Dante Taylor called out, rounding the corner with his tablet tucked under his arm. Dante was the night shift building manager, a former investigative journalist who'd burned out chasing corruption stories that never quite got published. He was the only person in the building Wesley had bothered to befriend, though even Dante didn't know the real reason Wesley was here. Dante, thought you'd left already. Last walkthrough. You hitting 42 tonight. 42 was the executive level. Thad Khan's floor. Every night, Wesley said evenly. Same routine. Dante studied him for a moment. You know, for a janitor, you got the vocabulary of a professor and the eyes of a guy who's looking for something. Wesley smiled without warmth. Found what I was looking for a long time ago, Dante. It's called job security. After Dante left, Wesley took the service elevator to 42. The executive floor always struck him as excessive. Hand-carved mahogany doors, original artwork that cost more than most people's homes, a receptionist desk that probably ran 6 figures. This was where Thad Khan, founder and CEO of Con Industries, ruled over his pharmaceutical empire. Wesley had done his research. Con Industries specialized in experimental drug trials, operating in the gray spaces where FDA oversight got murky. They'd been investigated twice, never formally charged. Thad Khan himself was 47, married to Petra Khan, née Bullock, no children, estimated net worth of $600 million. The man collected vintage cars and sat on 3 nonprofit boards. To the world, he was a philanthropist. To Wesley, he was something else entirely. The CEO's office was locked, but Wesley had learned to pick locks during his months here. Another skill people didn't expect from a janitor. He slipped inside, closing the door softly behind him. The office was obscene in its opulence. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a desk that could double as a dining table, leather furniture that probably cost more than Wesley's annual salary. He cleaned this room 47 times. Tonight was the first time he'd really searched it. Wesley started with the desk drawers, working methodically. Financial documents, contracts, nothing unexpected. He moved to the credenza, then the bookshelf. Behind a row of leather-bound volumes that had probably never been read, he found a small locked drawer. 5 minutes with a paperclip, and it clicked open. Inside was a single photograph. Wesley's hands went numb. The photo was from his wedding day. Stella in her white dress, radiant and laughing, her hand raised to tuck a strand of dark hair behind her ear. The image was burned into Wesley's memory. He had the same photo in his apartment, taken by Stella's best friend Kayla Church just moments before the ceremony. But why did Thad Khan have it? That was taken in Napa Valley, a voice said behind him. September 14th. The weather was perfect. She looked beautiful. Wesley spun around. Thad Khan stood in the doorway, still wearing his suit despite the late hour. His hand was on the door handle. His expression was unreadable. Why do you have this? Wesley's voice was steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. Khan stepped inside and closed the door. The lock clicked with a finality that made Wesley's pulse quicken. Because I'm the one who killed her. Chapter 2. Confession in the dark. The confession hung in the air between them like smoke. Wesley forced himself to stay calm, to think. He was 6'2" and still in decent shape despite the years, but Khan was younger, probably worked out regularly. The office had no other exits except the window, and they were 42 floors up. You're going to want to elaborate on that, Wesley said, his voice harder than steel. Khan moved to the bar cart and poured himself 3 fingers of scotch. His hands were steady. This wasn't the behavior of a man panicking over discovery. This was something else. Wesley Blanchard, Khan said, swirling the amber liquid. MIT class of '09, double major in applied mathematics and computer science. Founded Blanchard Consulting, made your first $1 million by 30. Then your wife Stella died, and everything fell apart. Lost the business, lost the house, disappeared for 3 years before resurfacing as... He gestured vaguely. This. You've been watching me. Since the day you applied for the position. Did you really think I wouldn't run a background check on every person who sets foot on this floor? Khan took a long drink. The question is, did you know who I was before you came here? Or was tonight's discovery genuine? Wesley calculated his options. The truth might be his best weapon now. I've been investigating my wife's death for 5 years. Every lead went cold. Then 6 months ago, I found evidence that Stella was working on something before she died. A pharmaceutical project. Experimental trials. That led me to Khan Industries. And you became a janitor. People don't see janitors. They talk freely. They leave things lying around. Wesley kept his distance from Khan, positioning himself closer to the door. So tell me, why did you kill her? Khan's laugh was bitter. Because she was going to destroy me. Your wife was brilliant, Wesley. That consulting firm you had? She was the real genius behind it. Those algorithms you sold to Fortune 500 companies? Stella developed 80% of them. It was true. Stella had been the mathematician, the programmer, the one who saw patterns in chaos. Wesley had been the face, the salesman, the one who could translate her genius into something clients understood. She was freelancing, Khan continued, doing analysis work for my company. We were developing a drug, Novitril, revolutionary pain management without opioid addiction. Or so we thought. Stella was analyzing the trial data when she found something. Found what? The drug was killing people. Not immediately. Not in ways that showed up in our trials. But long-term use caused organ failure. Kidney damage, liver damage. We're talking about a drug that would have made $1 billion in the first year, prescribed to millions of people. Khan's jaw tightened. Stella came to me with the data. She said we had to shut down the trials, report everything to the FDA. She didn't understand what that would mean. The company would have been destroyed. I would have been destroyed. So you push her off a parking garage and made it look like suicide. It was supposed to look like an accident. She was meeting me. We argued. She threatened to go public that night. I didn't plan it, Wesley. But when she turned her back, Khan drained his glass. Survival instinct is a powerful thing. Wesley felt rage building in his chest, but he kept it contained, compressed into something cold and useful. You're telling me this because you think I can't prove anything. You think you're safe. I'm telling you this because you deserve to know the truth. And because by morning, you'll be gone. You're going to kill me too. No. Khan pulled out his phone, typing something. I'm going to offer you a choice. Right now, Claire Newman, my head of security, is in the parking garage with a briefcase containing $5 million in cryptocurrency keys. You take it, you disappear, and you never speak of this again. Or, you turn the phone to show Wesley an image. A woman, late 30s, walking out of a grocery store. That's Kayla Church, Stella's best friend. Last person your wife called before she died. She lives at 2847 Parkside Avenue, apartment 4B. She has a daughter named Emma, age 7. Wesley's blood turned to ice. The choice is yours, Khan said softly. Money and silence. Or I start removing everyone you've ever cared about. Starting with Kayla. Then Dante Taylor downstairs. Yes, I know you two are friendly. Then your mother in Arizona. Then, I get the picture. Do you? Khan moved closer, his voice taking on an edge. Because I need you to truly understand. I've killed before, and I'll kill again. I've built something here, and I will protect it with everything I have. You're not the hero in this story, Wesley. You're just another problem to be solved. Wesley looked at the photograph, still clutched in his hand. Stella smiled. Her joy on their wedding day. The future they planned. I need time to think, he said. You have until 6 a.m. Claire will wait in the garage until then. After that, the offer expires, and we move to Plan B. Khan opened the door. You're free to go. But Wesley, don't make the mistake of thinking you can outmaneuver me. You're a smart man, but I'm a survivor. Wesley walked past Khan and out of the office, his mind already racing through scenarios. He took the elevator down, walked out of the building into the cool night air, and kept walking until he was certain he wasn't being followed. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. Dante, he said when the journalist answered. Remember when you said, I had the eyes of a guy looking for something? I need to tell you what I found. Chapter 3, The Architect of Ruin. They met at a 24-hour diner in a part of town where Khan's people wouldn't think to look. Dante Taylor slid into the booth across from Wesley, his eyes sharp despite the late hour. You look like you've seen a ghost, Dante said. Close. Wesley ordered coffee from the tired waitress and waited until she was out of earshot. My wife didn't commit suicide. She was murdered by Thad Khan. He told Dante everything. The photo, the confession, the threat, the offer. When he finished, Dante sat back, processing. Jesus Christ, Dante finally said. And you're not going to take the money, would you? No, but I'm not a smart man. I'm a journalist who threw away his career because I couldn't let a story go. Dante's smile was grim, which is exactly why I'm going to help you bury this son of a bitch. Khan has resources, money, power, people who will kill on his orders. And you have something he doesn't. Dante leaned forward. You have nothing left to lose. You already lost everything that mattered. That makes you dangerous. Wesley sipped his coffee, thinking, I spent 18 months in that building. I know his routines, his weaknesses, his secrets. And I've been preparing for this moment since the day I realized Stella's death wasn't an accident. What's the play? Khan killed Stella because she discovered Novitrol was toxic. He buried the evidence and launched the drug anyway. It's been on the market for 4 years now. Wesley pulled out a laptop from his bag, a piece of equipment that seemed incongruous for a janitor to carry. I've been tracking adverse event reports filed with the FDA. There's a pattern. Kidney and liver failures in long-term Novitrol users. But the reports are scattered, filed by different doctors in different states. No one's connected the dots because Khan Industries has been very careful about burying the connection. You've connected them. Every single one. I have names, dates, medical records. Everything Stella would have wanted brought to light. Wesley's voice was cold. But that's just the foundation. If I expose Khan now, he'll throw money at lawyers, settle out of court, maybe lose some stock value. He'll claim ignorance, blame subordinates. He might even avoid prison. So what are you planning? Wesley was quiet for a moment, staring at his reflection in the diner window. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made Dante shiver. I'm going to make him confess. Publicly. In a way he can't recant or deny. I'm going to strip away everything he's built. His reputation, his company, his freedom. And I'm going to make sure he knows exactly why it's happening. He looked at Dante. But I need help. And I need you to understand that what I'm about to do, it's not entirely legal. Good, Dante said. The legal route is what got my career killed. What do you need? Over the next 2 hours, Wesley laid out his plan. It was audacious, dangerous, and relied on dozens of variables aligning perfectly. But it was also elegant in its simplicity, used Khan's own paranoia and survival instinct against him. First, I need you to reach out to your old contacts. Anyone you know who worked on investigations into Khan Industries. I need everything they couldn't print, every rumor they couldn't verify, every source who was too scared to go on record. Dante nodded. I still have my files. There were at least 3 other journalists who tried to nail Khan before me. One of them died in a car accident 2 years ago. Suspicious? Officially? No. But it happened 2 weeks before he was supposed to testify in a wrongful death lawsuit against Khan Industries. The case was dismissed. Dante pulled out his phone, already scrolling through contacts. I'll reach out to the others. Second, I need to talk to Kayla Church. Stella's friend? Khan threatened her, which is why I need to warn her. But I also need to know what Stella told her before she died. Kayla was the last person Stella called. There might be something there. I'll set it up, Dante said. What else? Wesley's expression hardened. I need to meet Detective Quentin Lee. He was the lead investigator on Stella's death. The case was closed as accidental, but I always wondered if he believed that conclusion. You think he'll help? I think he'll want the truth. Most detectives do. Wesley stood, leaving cash on the table. We have until 6 a.m. before Khan's offer expires. After that, he'll come after us. We need to move fast. Kayla Church lived in a modest apartment complex in a neighborhood that had seen better days. When Wesley knocked at 4:15 a.m., she answered with a baseball bat in her hand and fear in her eyes. Wesley, her expression shifted from terror to confusion to relief in rapid succession. What the hell are you doing here at? We need to talk. About Stella. And about Thad Khan. The fear returned. I told the police everything I knew 5 years ago. I'm not police, and I need to know what you didn't tell them. Kayla hesitated, then led him inside. The apartment was small but tidy, with children's drawings on the refrigerator and the faint smell of last night's dinner. She'd rebuilt her life after Stella died, found some measure of peace. Wesley was about to shatter it. Khan knows about you, Wesley said without preamble. He threatened you tonight. You and Emma. The color drained from Kayla's face. Why? I don't know anything. You were the last person Stella called before she died. The night she confronted Khan. I need to know what she said. Kayla sat down heavily on the couch, the bat still clutched in her hands. She was scared. She said she'd found something at work, something bad. She said, Kayla's voice cracked. She said if anything happened to her, I should look into Khan Industries drug trials. She made me promise to remember that name, Novitril. Did she send you anything? Files, data, evidence. No, at least. I don't think so. Kayla's eyes widened. Wait, she sent me an email that night. I never opened it. It came through around 10 p.m., and by the next morning, she was dead. I couldn't bear to read it. It felt too much like reading a suicide note. Wesley's heart raced. Do you still have access to that email account? I never delete anything. Kayla grabbed her laptop with shaking hands, pulling up her email. She scrolled through her archived messages until she found it. The subject line was just 2 words, insurance policy. When she opened it, there was no text, just an encrypted file attachment and a string of numbers, what looked like a password. Wesley downloaded it immediately, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Stella was always paranoid about digital security. She taught me some of her tricks. He entered the number string, and the file unpacked into dozens of folders. Data, raw trial results, analysis reports, video recordings of meetings. This is everything, Wesley breathed. This is what Khan killed her for. What are you going to do? Kayla asked. Wesley met her eyes. I'm going to finish what Stella started. But you and Emma need to disappear for a few days. Do you have family out of state? My sister in Colorado. Go there. Today. Right now. Don't tell anyone where you're going. And Kayla, Wesley's voice softened. Stella was the best person I've ever known. What happened to her wasn't your fault. But I'm going to make sure Khan pays for it. Kayla nodded, tears streaming down her face. Make him suffer, Wesley. For Stella. I intend to. Detective Quentin Lee was eating breakfast at his desk when Wesley walked into the police station at 5:30 a.m. Lee looked up, recognition flickering across his weathered face. Wesley Blanchard. Haven't seen you in 3 years. 4. You investigated my wife's death. Lee's expression shuddered. That case is closed. Accidental fall. I'm sorry for your loss, but unless you have new evidence. I do. Wesley sat down uninvited and opened his laptop. My wife was murdered by Thad Khan. CEO of Con Industries. He confessed to me last night, and I have the evidence she died for. For the next 20 minutes, Wesley showed Lee everything. The encrypted files from Stella, the adverse event reports, the connection to Novitril, and finally, a recording he'd made on his phone of Con's confession. It wasn't admissible in court. Single-party consent wasn't legal in this state, but it was enough to make Lee sit up and listen. "Son of a bitch," Lee muttered, watching Con describe pushing Stella off the parking garage. I knew that case felt wrong, but Con had alibis, witnesses, lawyers. The pressure came from above to close it quick and move on. He's a rich man with connections, but he's also arrogant. He thinks he's untouchable. Wesley closed the laptop. "I need your help, detective. Not officially, but I need you to be ready to arrest him when the time comes." "When what time comes? What exactly are you planning?" Wesley smiled, and there was no warmth in it. "I'm going to make him confess again. This time, in front of witnesses. This time, in a way that can't be buried or denied." Lee studied him. "You're talking about some kind of revenge plan. I can't be part of that. I'm talking about justice. Stella deserves it. So do the people who've been harmed by Novitril. So do the next people Con would kill to protect his empire." Wesley stood. "All I'm asking is that you be ready. I'll call you when it's time. And detective, don't warn Con. He has people everywhere." Lee didn't respond, but he didn't stop Wesley from leaving either. As Wesley walked out of the station into the early morning sun, his phone buzzed. It was 6 a.m. A text from an unknown number. "Time's up. Made your choice? CN. Claire Newman. Con's enforcer." Wesley texted back. "Tell Con I'm coming for him." The response came immediately. "You're making a mistake." Wesley smiled at his phone. No, he did. 5 years ago. Chapter 4. Pieces in Motion. Wesley spent the next 3 days becoming invisible. He moved out of his apartment, crashed with Dante in a studio across town, and went completely off the grid. No credit cards, no phone calls except through burner phones, no digital footprint. He learned a few things during his 3-year disappearance after Stella's death. How to vanish when you needed to. But while he was invisible, his plan was becoming very visible indeed. Dante's journalism contacts had come through. By Wednesday morning, they had testimony from 3 former Con Industries employees who'd been part of the Novitril trials. All 3 had been paid generously to sign non-disclosure agreements. All 3 were now willing to break those agreements if it meant stopping Con. One of them was Dr. Socorro Drake, a clinical researcher who'd been let go from Con Industries 2 years prior. "I tried to tell them the drug was dangerous," Dr. Drake said, sitting in the diner where Wesley and Dante had made their headquarters. The data was clear. Long-term users were showing signs of organ damage. But Con suppressed the findings. He said we'd adjust the dosing recommendations and it would be fine. "Did you keep copies of the data?" Wesley asked. "I kept everything. Call it insurance against the day Con decided to make me a scapegoat." Dr. Drake pulled out a flash drive. Trial results, internal memos, emails between Con and his legal team discussing how to minimize liability. "It's all there." Wesley took the drive like it was made of gold. "Why didn't you come forward before?" "Because I was scared. Con Industries has deep pockets and dangerous friends. But when Dante reached out and told me about your wife," Dr. Drake's jaw tightened. "I knew Stella Vance. She consulted on the trial data analysis. She was brilliant and ethical. If Con killed her to silence her, then I can't stay quiet anymore." "You might lose everything," Dante warned. "Con will come after you legally, financially." "I'm 57 years old with terminal cancer," Dr. Drake interrupted. "Stage 4. 6 months if I'm lucky. Con can't take anything from me that matters anymore. But I can help make sure he pays for what he's done." Wesley felt a surge of respect for the woman. "Thank you. This will make a difference." Over the next days, more pieces fell into place. Dante tracked down Leonardo Salinas, Con's business partner and co-founder of Con Industries. Salinas had been pushed out of the company 3 years ago in what was portrayed as an amicable retirement. The truth was messier. They met Salinas at a country club where the man spent his days drinking expensive wine and nursing grievances against his former partner. "Thad Con is a snake," Salinas said without preamble. "Brilliant, charming, and absolutely ruthless. We built the company together, but when I started asking questions about Novitrol's safety profile, suddenly I was ready for retirement. He paid me enough to ensure my silence, but I've regretted taking that money every day since. What can you tell us about Khan's operations? Wesley asked. Everything. Thad and I have no privilege anymore. I'm not employed by the company, and I signed no NDAs when I left beyond the standard stock options agreement. Salinas' smile was sharp. I know where every body is buried, metaphorically speaking, and I'm happy to help dig them up. Salinas provided detailed information about Khan Industries' financial structure, the offshore accounts used to hide payments to researchers who delivered favorable results, the network of shell companies used to insulate Khan from liability. It was a masterclass in corporate corruption. But Wesley's most important ally came from an unexpected direction. On Friday afternoon, as Wesley was reviewing Dr. Drake's data in Dante's apartment, there was a knock at the door. Dante checked the peephole, then opened it to reveal Detective Quentin Lee. Should have known you'd be involved, Lee said to Dante. Always did have a death wish when it came to powerful people. Detective, Wesley said carefully. I'm surprised to see you. Don't be. I've been doing some digging of my own. Lee came inside, pulling out a thick folder. Your wife's case file. The official one, and he pulled out another folder, thinner, my unofficial notes. The things that bother me. The inconsistencies I couldn't explain. Wesley took the folders like they were sacred texts. Why are you helping? Because I've been a cop for 27 years, and I can count on one hand the number of cases that keep me up at night. Stella Vance is one of them. Lee's expression was hard. I knew something was wrong. The scene was too clean, too convenient. Khan's alibi was too perfect. But I had no proof, and my lieutenant was pushing to close the case. Now you've given me proof. Unofficially, Wesley reminded him. Officially, I'm investigating new leads in an old case. Unofficially, I'm making sure that when you bring Khan down, there's a cop there to put him in handcuffs. Lee sat down. So tell me the rest of your plan. Wesley glanced at Dante, who nodded. Then he laid it out. Khan thinks he's won. He thinks I either took his money or I'm hiding. He thinks the threat against Kayla and others scared me off. That's exactly where I want him, complacent, confident. Wesley opened his laptop, showing a complex flowchart. But I've been busy. I've sent the Novitrol data to 3 separate journalists at major newspapers, all people Dante trusts. They're vetting it now, preparing stories. I've also filed complaints with the FDA under multiple names, victims' families, anonymous researchers. The agency is starting to take notice. That'll take months to result in any action, Lee pointed out. I know, which is why we're not waiting for official channels. Wesley pulled up another document. In 2 weeks, Khan Industries is holding their annual shareholder meeting. It's mandatory. Khan has to attend. It's held at the Grand Metropolitan Hotel downtown, with over 300 shareholders present. Press coverage. Public records. You're going to expose him there, Dante said, understanding dawning. Better. I'm going to make him confess. Again. But this time, I'll have audiovisual evidence, witnesses, and Detective Lee waiting to make an arrest. Wesley's smile was predatory. I'm going to destroy him in front of everyone who matters to him. His investors, his peers, the media. And I'm going to do it using his own words. Lee frowned. How exactly are you planning to get a confession? By giving him exactly what he wants most in the world, Wesley said. A way out. A solution to his problem. Me. Chapter 5. Debate. The shareholder meeting was on a Tuesday. Wesley had 12 days to prepare. He spent them meticulously, obsessively, checking and rechecking every detail. This wasn't just about revenge, though God knew he wanted that. This was about making sure Khan couldn't wriggle free, couldn't buy his way out, couldn't sacrifice a subordinate while he walked away clean. This was about justice for Stella and everyone else Khan had hurt. On the Friday before the meeting, Wesley made his move. He sent an email to Thad Khan from an anonymous account. We need to talk. Your shareholder meeting is in 4 days. I have information that will destroy you, but I'm willing to negotiate. Meet me at the old Riverside warehouse, Saturday midnight. Come alone, and we can make a deal. Bring security, and everything goes public Monday morning. WB. The response came within an hour. You're insane if you think I'm walking into that trap. Whatever game you're playing, it's over. TK. Wesley smiled and sent another email. Not a trap. I have what Stella had, the complete no-vitral data. But I also have more. I've spent 5 years digging into your past, Khan. I know about the other trials, the other bodies, the other crimes you buried. I know things that would put you away for life. But I'm tired. I'm done. I want out, and I want compensation. $50 million in cryptocurrency transferred to an account I'll provide. In exchange, you get everything I have. Every copy, every file, every piece of evidence. It disappears, and so do I. Or you can refuse, and I burn your empire to the ground Tuesday morning in front of 300 shareholders and a dozen reporters. Your choice. WB. This time, the response took longer. For hours. When it came, it was cautious. If you have what you say you have, prove it. Wesley had anticipated this. He sent a single file, a video clip from Stella's data. It showed Khan in a meeting with his legal team, discussing how to manage the no-vitral adverse event reports. The audio was clear, damning. That's a sample. I have 40 hours of recordings like that, plus the trial data, plus sworn testimony from 3 former employees, plus financial records showing how you've been paying off doctors and researchers. You've been thorough, Khan, but Stella was more thorough. Meet me Saturday or face the consequences. WB. The final response came at midnight. Riverside Warehouse. Saturday at midnight. I'm bringing Claire Newman with me for security. Non-negotiable. TK. Perfect. Wesley wanted Claire there. The more witnesses to what was about to happen, the better. This is insane, Dante said for the 15th time. You're meeting with a man who's already admitted to murder, and you're doing it in an abandoned warehouse like this is some kind of action movie. It needs to feel like a trap, Wesley explained, adjusting the tiny camera hidden in his jacket button. Khan has to think he's walking in my endgame. He needs to feel threatened enough to make a mistake. They were in Dante's apartment, preparing. Detective Lee sat on the couch, checking his service weapon with the practiced ease of a man who'd been doing it for 3 decades. I don't like this, Lee said. Too many variables. What if Khan just shoots you? He won't. He's careful, methodical. He'll want to see what I have first, verify it's real. And he'll want to make sure that killing me won't somehow trigger a dead man switch that releases everything. Wesley finished with the camera and moved to the backup recording device, a phone in his pocket that would stream audio to Dante's laptop. Besides, you'll be watching. If things go south, you move in. If things go south, you could be dead before I get there, Lee pointed out. Then make sure you're close enough to prevent that. Saturday night arrived cold and clear. The Riverside Warehouse sat in an industrial district that had been declining for 20 years. Half the buildings were abandoned, and the area was deserted after dark. It was perfect for what Wesley needed: isolated, atmospheric, and thoroughly wired with the surveillance equipment Dante had spent the last 3 days installing. Wesley arrived at 11:45 p.m., parking his car, a rental registered under a fake name, in the shadows. He walked into the warehouse through the main entrance, his footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. The building had once been a textile factory. Now it was just rusted machinery and broken windows. At 11:58 p.m., a sleek black SUV pulled up outside. Thad Khan stepped out, followed by Claire Newman, a mountain of a man with dead eyes and a visible sidearm. They entered cautiously, Newman leading with a tactical flashlight. Wesley Blanchard, Khan called out. Show yourself. Wesley stepped into the pool of light from Newman's flashlight. I'm here, alone as promised. Khan studied him. You look different than I remember. Harder. Prison will do that to a man, or so I imagine. Where have you been hiding? Around. Watching you. Learning your patterns. Wesley kept his hands visible, non-threatening. Did you bring what I asked for? Khan held up a tablet. Cryptocurrency wallet access. $50 million as requested. But you don't get this until I verify you have what you claim. Fair enough. Wesley pulled out his phone, bringing up a folder structure. This is everything Stella compiled, plus 5 years of my own investigation. Trial data, financial records, witness statements, video, and audio recordings. Enough to put you away from multiple life sentences. Let me see. Wesley handed over the phone. Khan scrolled through the files, his expression darkening with each screen. Beside him, Claire Newman stayed alert, his hand never far from his weapon. "This is comprehensive," Khan finally said. "Your wife was even more dangerous than I thought. She was brilliant and ethical. Everything you're not." Khan looked up sharply. "Careful, Wesley. You're here to make a deal, remember? Not deliver moral lectures." "Actually," Wesley said, his voice changing, growing colder, "I'm here for something else entirely." That's when the lights came on. Chapter 6, The Trap Springs. Floodlights blazed throughout the warehouse, revealing that Wesley wasn't alone. Detective Quentin Lee stepped out from behind a concrete pillar, his badge visible, his weapon drawn but pointed at the ground. Dante Taylor emerged from another direction, a video camera in his hands. And behind Khan and Newman, blocking the exit, stood two uniformed officers. "What the hell is this?" Khan demanded. "This," Wesley said, "is justice." "Detective Lee, I believe you have questions for Mr. Khan regarding the death of Stella Vance." But Khan was already moving, his lawyer instincts kicking in. "I'm not saying anything without my attorney present. And this," he gestured at the setup, "this is entrapment. Nothing recorded here is admissible." "You're right about that," Lee admitted, "which is why I'm not arresting you right now. I'm here as a witness." Khan's eyes narrowed. "A witness to what?" "To this." Wesley pulled out a remote control and clicked it. A projector hummed to life, throwing a massive image onto the warehouse wall, the photo of Stella from Khan's office drawer. "That's my wife, the woman you murdered 5 years ago. The woman you've kept a photo of like some kind of trophy." "I'm leaving," Khan said, turning toward the exit. "I wouldn't," Wesley said calmly. Claire Newman had taken a step toward the door, but froze when the two uniformed officers moved to block the path. "Because while this meeting isn't admissible, what happens Tuesday at your shareholder meeting will be very admissible. And very public." Khan turned back slowly. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that I don't actually need your confession. Not anymore. I have enough evidence to bury you 20 times over. Dr. Socorro Drake is going to testify. Leonardo Salinas is going to testify. 3 major newspapers are running stories on Monday about Novitrol's safety issues and your cover-up. The FDA is launching a formal investigation, and Detective Lee is reopening my wife's case with new evidence." Wesley stepped closer, his voice hard as iron. "I brought you here tonight to give you one chance. One opportunity to do the right thing before everything comes crashing down. Tuesday morning, at your shareholder meeting, you're going to confess. Everything. Stella's murder, the Novitrol cover-up, all of it. You're going to tell the truth, publicly, and you're going to face the consequences." Khan laughed, but sounded forced. "And why would I do that?" "Because if you don't, I'm going to make sure your wife goes down with you." That got a reaction. Khan's face went white. "Petra has nothing to do with this." "Doesn't she?" Wesley clicked the remote again. New images appeared on the wall, bank records, emails, meeting notes. Petra Khan, née Bullock, served as chief financial officer at Khan Industries until 2019. She was directly involved in the decision to suppress Novitrol's safety data. She signed off on the payments to researchers. She helped structure the shell companies used to hide assets. She's as guilty as you are. That's not true. Petra does what I tell her. She's innocent. Then prove it. Tuesday morning, you confess. Take full responsibility. Make it clear that you acted alone, that you deceived your wife and your company. You do that, and I'll make sure the investigation focuses on you and you alone. Petra walks away free. Wesley's smile was sharp. "But if you don't confess, if you try to fight this, I'm going to make sure Petra is charged as a co-conspirator. Your children, oh wait, you don't have any. But your wife? She'll spend the rest of her life in prison, and that will be on you." Khan stood frozen, his mind clearly racing through options. Wesley watched him calculate, watched the survival instinct war with the protective instinct. "You're bluffing," Khan finally said. "Petra's exposure is minimal. Try me," Wesley said softly. "You kill my wife. You threaten Kayla and her daughter. You've left a trail of victims in your wake. I have nothing left to lose, Khan. But you do. So here's how this is going to work. Tuesday morning, you show up at that shareholder meeting. At exactly 10:15 a.m., during the Q&A session, you're going to stand up and confess everything. The murder, the cover-up, all of it. Detective Lee will be there to arrest you. And Petra will be in the audience, hearing it for the first time. And if I refuse, then Monday morning, the FBI raids your house and arrests both of you. I've been working with an assistant district attorney, friend of Dante's. She's very interested in the evidence I compiled. Wesley held up a flash drive. This contains everything. Copies are already in safe deposit boxes with attorneys, with journalists. You can't stop what's coming. The only choice you have is whether you face it alone or drag Petra down with you. Kahn's hands were shaking now. Claire Newman stood tense beside him, clearly wanting to act but unsure what action to take. Why Tuesday? Kahn asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Why give me 3 days? Because I want you to suffer. I want you to spend the next 3 days knowing exactly what's coming. I want you to lie next to your wife at night, knowing you're about to destroy her life along with your own. Unless you do the right thing. Wesley's expression was merciless. Stella had 3 days between when you threatened her and when you killed her. 3 days of fear, of knowing someone wanted her dead. I'm giving you the same courtesy. Kahn looked at the images on the wall, at the evidence of his crimes displayed like an art gallery of his sins. Then he looked at Wesley with something that might have been respect. You're a ruthless son of a bitch, Kahn said. I learned from the best, Wesley replied. See you Tuesday, Kahn. Don't be late. Lee and his officers escorted Kahn and Newman out of the warehouse. Wesley watched them go, feeling something cold and hard settle in his chest. Not satisfaction, not yet, but certainty. This was really happening. That was intense, Dante said, lowering his camera. Think he'll actually confess? He will, Wesley said, because at the end of the day, Kahn's a survivor. And I just gave him a way to survive this, barely. He'll sacrifice himself to save his wife. It's the only play he has left. Lee returned a few minutes later, holstering his weapon. I don't like this. It's too elaborate. What if Kahn runs? What if he just doesn't show up Tuesday? He'll show, Wesley said with confidence he didn't entirely feel. Kahn's ego won't let him run. He spent his whole life building an empire, creating an image. He won't destroy that by fleeing. He'll show up, thinking he can somehow talk his way out of this, somehow find an angle we haven't considered. And if he does find an angle, Wesley's smile was cold. Then we go to plan B. But he won't. I know how he thinks. I've spent 5 years studying him. Tuesday morning, Thad Kahn is going to confess to murder in front of 300 witnesses. And you're going to arrest him. I hope you're right, Lee said. Wesley looked at the projection on the wall, Stella's photo, frozen in a moment of joy that Kahn had stolen from her. I have to be right. For her. Chapter 7, The Longest Weekend. Sunday was the hardest. Wesley spent it in Dante's apartment, reviewing the plan obsessively, checking for flaws. Every hour that passed felt like a week. What if Kahn ran? What if he called Wesley's bluff? What if he found some way to turn this around? You need to sleep, Dante said around midnight. You're no good to anyone if you collapse. I can't. Not yet. Wesley was on his laptop, monitoring news feeds, watching for any sign that Kahn was making moves. He's had 24 hours to process. If he's going to run or fight, he'll make his move soon. But Kahn didn't run. Instead, he did something Wesley hadn't anticipated. He went to church. Dante's contact at a local newspaper sent a photo. Thad Kahn and his wife Petra, sitting in the front pew of St. Michael's Cathedral for Sunday morning service. They looked like any other wealthy couple seeking spiritual guidance. But Wesley saw the truth in Kahn's posture, the way he gripped Petra's hand like a drowning man clutching a life preserver. He's saying goodbye to his old life, Wesley observed, making peace with what's coming. On Monday, Kahn went to work as usual. But according to Leonardo Salinas, who still had friends in the company, Kahn spent the day in private meetings with his legal team and CFO. Company insiders reported he seemed distracted, unfocused. One secretary mentioned he'd been staring at a photograph on his desk for nearly an hour during the afternoon. What photograph? Wesley asked when Dante relayed the information. She didn't know. Something in a frame he usually keeps in his drawer. Wesley knew exactly which photograph it was. Monday night, at 11:47 p.m., Wesley's burner phone rang. The number was unlisted. He answered on the fourth ring. Wesley. Khan's voice was tired, defeated. Tomorrow. I'll do it. But I need your word that Petra walks away from this clean. You have it, Wesley said. Confess to everything. Stella's murder, the Novitrol cover-up, everything. Take full responsibility. Make it clear you acted alone and deceived everyone around you. Do that, and Petra's name stays out of the charges. How do I know you won't go back on your word? Because unlike you, I keep my promises. And because I'm not interested in punishing innocent people. I'm interested in justice. Wesley paused. Stella believed in redemption. Even at the end, she gave you a chance to do the right thing. I'm giving you the same chance. Don't waste it. Khan was silent for a long moment. I didn't want to kill her. I want you to know that. It was never supposed to happen that way. But it did happen. And you've spent 5 years trying to bury it. Tomorrow, you stop running. Tomorrow, Khan agreed and disconnected. Wesley set down the phone and exhaled slowly. Dante looked up from his laptop. He's really going to do it? Yes, Wesley said. He's going to confess. Tuesday morning arrived with crystalline clarity. The Grand Metropolitan Hotel's conference hall was already filling with shareholders, press, and Khan Industries employees by 9:30 a.m. Wesley arrived early, wearing a suit he'd borrowed from Dante, the first formal clothing he'd worn in 18 months. He blended into the crowd, just another attendee at a corporate event. Detective Lee was there too, along with 2 plainclothes officers positioned near the exits. Dante sat in the press section with his camera and his old press credentials, ready to document everything. Dr. Socorro Drake was in attendance, her face drawn but determined. Leonardo Salinas sat in the front row, his expression unreadable. And in the back, almost unnoticed, sat Kayla Church. She'd returned from Colorado despite Wesley's advice, saying she needed to see this for Stella. At 9:55 a.m., Thad Khan entered the room with his wife Petra and several members of his executive team. He looked composed, every inch the successful CEO, but Wesley noticed the tightness around his eyes, the way his hands trembled slightly when he greeted shareholders. The meeting started on schedule. Financial reports were presented. Projected growth was discussed. Dividends were announced. It was all terribly mundane, the machinery of capitalism grinding along as if justice wasn't about to be served. At 10:12 a.m., the floor was open for questions. At 10:15 a.m., exactly as Wesley had demanded, Thad Khan stood up. Before we proceed further, Khan said, his voice carrying across the silent room, I have something I need to say. Something I should have said 5 years ago. The room went quiet. Petra looked up at her husband in confusion. The board members exchanged glances, and Wesley held his breath. My name is Thad Khan, and I'm a murderer. Chapter 8, Confession. The conference room erupted. Shareholders shouted questions. Reporters surged forward with cameras and recorders. The board members tried to intervene, to stop Khan from speaking, but he waved them off. Please, Khan said, his voice cracking. Let me finish. I need to finish. Petra stood up, grabbing his arm. Thad, what are you doing? What are you talking about? Khan looked at his wife with infinite sadness. I'm sorry, Petra, for everything, for lying to you, for putting you in danger, for destroying everything we built. He turned back to the room. 5 years ago, I murdered a woman named Stella Vance. She was a consultant working for Khan Industries, analyzing data from our Novitrol drug trials. She discovered that the drug was causing serious health problems, organ damage, kidney failure. She came to me with the evidence and told me we needed to shut down the trials, report everything to the FDA. The room was completely silent now, everyone hanging on Khan's words. I couldn't let that happen. Novitrol was supposed to be our flagship product, our breakthrough. I'd invested everything in it. Money, reputation, the company's future. If we shut it down, Khan Industries would have collapsed. I would have been destroyed. Khan's hands gripped the podium. So I killed her. I invited her to meet me at a parking garage downtown. We argued. She turned to leave, to go public with the data, and I pushed her over the railing. I made it look like an accident. Petra made it sound like a wounded animal. Khan couldn't look at her. But it didn't end there, he continued, his voice mechanical now, like he was reading from a script he'd memorized. I suppressed the Novitrol safety data. I paid researchers to falsify results. I buried adverse event reports. I spent 5 years selling a drug I knew was harming people, all to protect my company and my reputation. And when Stella's husband, Khan's eyes found Wesley in the crowd, when Wesley Blanchard started investigating, I threatened him. I threatened his friends. I offered him money to stay silent. I was prepared to kill him too, if necessary. Detective Lee was already moving toward the podium, his badge out. The uniformed officers moved to block the exits. Khan held up his hands. I'm not running. I'm done running. Khan finally looked at his wife. Petra knew nothing about any of this. She's innocent. Everything I did alone. I deceived her. I deceived the board. I deceived everyone. The guilt is mine and mine alone. Lee reached the podium. Thad Khan, you're under arrest for the murder of Stella Vance and multiple counts of fraud, obstruction of justice, and corporate malfeasance. He began reading the Miranda rights as he cuffed Khan's hands behind his back. The conference room devolved into chaos. Reporters were shouting questions, shareholders were demanding answers, board members were trying to maintain control. Petra Khan had collapsed into a chair, sobbing, as attorneys swarmed around her. Wesley watched it all from his position in the crowd, feeling something he hadn't felt in 5 years, completion. Not peace, not satisfaction exactly, but the sense that a terrible journey had finally reached its end. Dante appeared beside him, still recording everything. You did it, he said quietly. Stella did it, Wesley corrected. I just finished what she started. As Lee led Khan toward the exit, the CEO stopped and turned to find Wesley in the crowd. Their eyes met across the room. Khan nodded once, an acknowledgement, perhaps an apology. Wesley stared back, his face expressionless. Then Khan was gone, led away by the police, and the chaos continued around them. The aftermath was swift and brutal. By Tuesday afternoon, Khan Industries' stock had plummeted. By Wednesday, the FDA had announced a formal investigation into Novitrol and suspended sales pending review. By Thursday, the first wave of lawsuits had been filed by victims' families. Wesley gave his statement to Detective Lee, turned over all of Stella's evidence, and then stopped. For the first time in 5 years, he had nothing to chase, no investigation to pursue, no revenge to plan. The sudden absence of purpose was disorienting. He met with Dr. Socorro Drake at a coffee shop Friday afternoon. She looked tired but satisfied. The FDA wants to interview me, she said. My testimony is going to help shut down not just Novitrol, but several other questionable trials Khan was running. We might actually save some lives. Stella would be happy about that, Wesley said. She'd be proud of you. Dr. Drake corrected gently. You could have just killed Khan. God knows you had reason to. But you made him face justice instead. That takes strength. It takes something, Wesley agreed. I'm not sure it's strength. Saturday morning, Wesley visited Stella's grave for the first time in 2 years. He brought flowers, white roses, her favorite, and sat on the grass beside the headstone. It's done, he said quietly. Khan confessed. He's going to prison for the rest of his life. The drug you died to expose is being pulled from market. Your data is saving lives. He paused, feeling the weight of 5 years pressing down on him. I know you wouldn't have wanted me to spend so long on revenge. You always said life was for living, not for dwelling on the past. But I couldn't let it go. I couldn't let him get away with it. The wind rustled through the cemetery trees. Wesley imagined he could hear Stella's voice in it. Not forgiving, not condemnation, just her presence, the memory of who she'd been. I don't know what comes next, he admitted. I don't know who I am anymore, without the investigation, without the anger. But I'm going to figure it out. For you. For us. He stayed at the grave until sunset, talking to her, remembering better days, and finally saying goodbye. Chapter 9. Restoration. 3 months after Khan's confession, Wesley stood in front of a small office building in the business district. The sign above the door read, Vance Consulting Group, Data Analysis and Corporate Ethics. Dante stood beside him, holding a cardboard box full of office supplies. You sure about the name? Using her maiden name? I'm sure. This is her legacy as much as mine. Maybe more. Wesley unlocked the door and stepped inside. The office was small but well lit, with windows overlooking the street. It smelled of fresh paint and new possibilities. VCG, Dante said, testing the acronym, has a nice ring to it. Over the past 3 months, Wesley had rebuilt his life from the ground up. He'd used some of the settlement money from a lawsuit against Con Industries. They'd paid handsomely to avoid admitting they'd knowingly employed a murderer to start a new consulting firm. But this wasn't about making money. This was about making sure what happened to Stella never happened again. Vance Consulting Group specialized in corporate ethics and safety data analysis. They worked with pharmaceutical companies, medical device manufacturers, anyone dealing with products that could harm people if the data was manipulated or suppressed. Wesley had partnered with Dr. Socorro Drake, still alive, defying her prognosis, and Leonardo Salinas, who'd brought his knowledge of corporate corruption to the team. We start taking clients Monday, Wesley said, unpacking the box. Already have 3 pharmaceutical companies requesting audits of their trial data. Apparently, our reputation precedes us. Though I exposed a murderous CO reputation, Dante asked with a grin. Though we actually care about safety over profit's reputation, Wesley corrected. But he was smiling too. The door opened, and Kayla Church entered with her daughter Emma. The 7-year-old ran to Wesley and hugged his legs, a ritual that had started after the trial, when Kayla had brought Emma to meet the man who'd made sure her Aunt Stella got justice. Uncle Wesley, Emma said excitedly. Mom says you're opening your office today. That's right. Want to see? Wesley gave them a tour of the small space, showing Emma the desk where he'd work, the meeting room where they'd consult with clients, the wall where he'd hung a large photograph of Stella, not from her wedding day, but from a work conference where she was presenting data, her face alive with intellectual excitement. She looks happy, Kayla said softly, looking at the photo. She was happiest when she was solving problems, Wesley agreed. When she was using her mind to make things better. That's what we're going to do here. After Kayla and Emma left, Wesley stood alone in his new office, looking at Stella's photograph. The past 3 months had been a whirlwind. Con's trial, the media attention, the settlements, the interviews. But through it all, Wesley had focused on building something meaningful from the ashes of tragedy. Con had been sentenced to life without parole for Stella's murder, plus additional decades for the corporate crimes. Novitril had been pulled from the market, and victims were finally getting compensation. Petra Khan had divorced her husband and was cooperating with investigators. Her name cleared as Khan had promised. And Wesley was learning to live again. His phone buzzed with a text from Detective Lee. Lunch next week? Want to talk about another cold case that could use your eyes? Wesley smiled and replied, absolutely. He'd found his purpose again, but it was different now. Not revenge, not anger, justice. Helping people who couldn't help themselves. Exposing truths that powerful people wanted buried. Using his skills to make sure no one else lost their loved ones to corporate greed and murderous secrets. He pulled out his laptop and started working on the company's first case. A medical device manufacturer whose product had been linked to 12 deaths, but whose executives were claiming ignorance. Wesley dove into the data with the same intensity he'd once directed at Con, feeling the familiar thrill of the investigation. But this time it wasn't personal. This time it was professional. This time he was Stella's partner again, continuing the work she'd started, fighting the battle she'd fought. As the sun set over the city, Wesley worked late in his new office, surrounded by data and evidence and the photograph of his wife smiling down at him. He'd started this journey in darkness, drowning in grief and rage. He'd followed it through 5 years of obsession and 18 months of deception. Now, finally, he'd found his way back to the light. We got him, Stella, Wesley said to the photograph. And we're just getting started. Outside, the city hummed with life. Millions of people going about their days, unaware of the battles being fought in their name, the dangers being uncovered, the justice being served. Wesley was aware now, in a way he hadn't been before Stella's death. Aware of the darkness that lurked behind corporate smiles and polished press releases. But he was also aware of something else: the capacity for good, for redemption, for using pain as fuel to create something meaningful. He'd been broken by loss, consumed by revenge, driven by rage. But he'd emerged on the other side, not as a victim or a vigilante, but as someone who'd chosen justice over vengeance, purpose over despair. His computer dinged with an email from Dr. Drake. "Reviewed the medical device data you sent. This is worse than we thought. We need to move fast." Wesley cracked his knuckles and started typing his response, already formulating a plan. There were more Thad Khans in the world. More people who put profits over lives, who buried evidence and silenced whistleblowers. But now there was also Vance Consulting Group, standing ready to expose them. Stella's death had changed him irrevocably. But her life, her ethics, her brilliance, her commitment to truth, that was his guide now. That was the legacy worth preserving. Wesley Blanchard had spent 5 years as a ghost, 18 months as a janitor, and 3 days executing the perfect revenge. Now he was something else entirely: a guardian, a detective, a voice for the silenced. And he was just getting started. Epilogue. 2 years later. The headline in the Wall Street Journal read, "Vance Consulting Group exposes massive safety cover-up at biotech giant. CEO arrested." Wesley set down the newspaper and smiled. VCG had grown to 15 employees, with offices in 3 cities. They'd exposed 8 corporate cover-ups, saved countless lives, and put 6 executives in prison. Dr. Drake had finally succumbed to her cancer 6 months prior, but not before training 3 new analysts to carry on her work. Leonardo Salinas was now their COO, using his insider knowledge to identify companies worth investigating. Dante Taylor had returned to journalism, writing exposés based on VCG's findings. His latest article, a comprehensive look at corporate corruption in the pharmaceutical industry, had been nominated for a Pulitzer. And Wesley? Wesley had finally stopped having nightmares about Stella's death. Instead, he dreamed of her life, their life together, the future they'd planned, the work they'd both believed in. The dreams weren't painful anymore. They were reminders of what mattered, fuel for the battles ahead. Thad Khan would spend the rest of his life in prison, his empire destroyed, his name synonymous with corporate greed and murder. Petra had remarried and moved to Europe, finally finding peace away from the scandal. Kayla and Emma were thriving, and Wesley was a regular presence in their lives. Uncle Wesley, the man who'd made sure Aunt Stella's sacrifice meant something. Justice, Wesley had learned, wasn't just about punishment.